From Toronto to Tokyo, and from Thonia to Syrinx, this is The Basement, your companion to the Ready Player One novel. Join our hosts each episode for complete chapter breakdowns and deep dives into the pop culture references through a series of challenges and homework assignments. The Basement is the Ready Player One podcast for people who love things. And now, please welcome Albert and the rest of the Gunters for this week's episode. Hello, Gunters. You are in the basement. This is episode 0011. My name is Albert Padilla, and we're going to be diving into Chapter 11 of the Ready Player One novel, talk about the narrative, the summary narrative, and all the pop culture references throughout. And with me tonight, we've got two special guests that are going to be joining us. First off, please welcome Mr. Dr. Will 8-Bit. Will, welcome back to the show.
Good to see you, Albert.
How are you doing?
Oh, not too bad, man. I'm ready to do this. It's going to be a great show. We've got great guests, so we're going to talk about two fantastic movies, along with some other nonsense like the beepers.
The beepers, yes. Well, don't spoil anything, because also joining us is Jason from Smoking and Drinking in Space, a podcast that I'm a huge fan of, and I won't spoil anything. But Jason, welcome to the show, sir. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yes.
It was great to get invited.
I know. And I honestly wanted to get you on. You were slotted. Like, I was looking through my old show notes, and I still have, and I won't spoil some of the other guests that I still got lined up that I wanted to get to at some point. And then I took this like almost a 2-year hiatus on the show and came back. So I'm glad we got you in sooner rather than later. So thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Hey, not a problem.
So you're our guest, you're our host. So, and we've not had a chance to talk about Ready Player One. So tell us what your experiences with either the movie, the novel, and then tell us about Smoking and Drinking in Space, because there's a really cool story there and what you guys do on that show.
Okay. So I have not read the novel.
That's okay.
It's just something I haven't read yet, but I have seen the movie, and I really like the movie. It was a great nostalgia trip. Very well done.
Mm-hmm.
I think probably the favorite part of the movie to me is the recreation of The Shining. That was that was brilliant.
Yeah.
In fact, I watched The Shining not too long ago in conjunction with Dr. Sleep. That was a great night of Stephen King watching. But over on Smoking and Drinking in Space, we're just a couple guys who talk about sci-fi. Currently, we are working through the Summer of Star Trek, where we're reviewing all 10 of the prime timeline Star Trek films. We'll be doing Insurrection next. So we're almost done. Yeah, it's definitely
it's going to be a rough landing here. Yeah,
it's definitely the low point of all the Star Trek films. But so we'll do Insurrection and then Nemesis, and then we're hopefully going to be covering the Bill and Ted movies shortly after that in the run up to Bill and Ted Face the Music. Very cool.
Very cool. And I got to ask you, so first off, do you guys still do the pod crawl? Is that still a thing?
Oh, yes. Okay. The pod crawl every week.
It is the best thing in the world. So if you guys get a chance, go check out Jason, check out Smoking and Drinking Space. It's part of the Brain Candy Network. They do this thing called pod crawl. Well, no, tell us what it is real quick. I want you to explain. You'll probably do a better job than I will.
So we do a pretty deep dive or well, depending on the movie, we either do a deep dive into the movie or we just dunk on it for close to an hour. But the pod crawl is just a brief summary. Hopefully, it makes you laugh a little bit. It's a brief comedic summary of the movie as a whole, just to get you, in case you haven't seen the movie, you can still kind of follow along on what's going on with the podcast and what we're talking about. And it's usually read by a British lady.
It is. It's like a computer synthesized voice that reads you something that you've wrote that summarizes the movie, but it kicks off with like Red screaming, which is like the best thing ever. Who Red is a former host that used to be with the show. But anyways, it's one of my favorite moments, and I think I've told you this before. Like when I heard that, I thought, man, that is brilliant. I should have done something like that for The Basement. So I'm a huge fan of the pod crawl. So, all right,
thank you.
I got one last question before we get into the chapter 11 for you, though, Jason. So
Let's do it.
Have you done Ready Player One on the show? Do you have any plans to it, or does it fit into the science fiction, science fantasy stuff that you normally do?
We have not done Ready Player One yet.
Okay.
And you kind of prefaced the question before we went live. And so I looked on the great big list of sci-fi titles, which you can find out on smokinganddrinkinginspace.com. It has all of the titles that we have scheduled and titles that we've already reviewed.
Yeah.
I didn't actually see it on there for some reason, but yeah, it is a science fiction movie.
Dude,
so
get it on there.
should actually, and I've already done it. I've already rectified the problem. It is on the list.
Awesome. That's good to hear. I can't wait to hear that one. Yeah, that should be a lot of fun. So again, thank you for being here.
Hey, not a problem.
All right. Let's get into a recap quickly on chapter 10. Then we'll do our normal summary and talk about the narrative of chapter 11. So chapter 10, in search of the first gate, Parzival travels to the virtual and unassuming hometown of James Halliday, Middletown, Ohio. There he attempts to search the trash, the TRS-80 color computer, in the deepest level of Dungeons of Daggerath, a dungeon crawl game for the Trash 80. He eventually completes the game and jumps through the first gate, which reveals itself in front of a War Games poster on the wall. Chapter 11, Parzival finds himself playing Galaga in an old video game, unaware of who he is or what he's doing there, until he sees his reflection in the Galaga video game screen and realizes that he is David Lightman, the titular character from the 1982 film War Games. In order to complete the first gate, Parzival must recite every line, gesture, and movement of David Lightman in the movie as part of an activity within the Oasis known as a flick sync. After successfully completing the movie, Parzival is awarded the next clue leading to the Jade Key, which reads, "The captain conceals the Jade Key in a dwindling long neglected, but you can only blow the whistle once the trophies are all collected." Having been awake for nearly 24 hours straight, Wade finally logs out of the Oasis and falls asleep in his hideout van. He dreams he's acquired the egg only to have it ripped from his body and his body torn to shreds. And that's kind of how it ends right there on the nightmare. So let's first talk about flick syncs. And Will, I want to ask you something because I know this is going to bleed right into like your karaoke. So if you don't know Will, he's got his whole garage has been converted into like this full on karaoke studio. And I'm not even kidding you. They've got fog machines, laser lights. And I think he's got roadies that come in and set all that up every time before. But this kind of, the idea of a flick sync, essentially what it is you have a movie and you've got to go ahead and say the lines and you can have other people up there. But we already have something like this, right? I mean, you mentioned there's like, is it Movieoke is one?
Yeah,
and there's another
Movieoke is just like karaoke. There are bars that do it. It's popular like in the early 2000s where you could go out and do a solo monologue or you could do a duet with somebody and go up there and the words would pop up on the screen. There's also a couple of apps that kind of work similar to some of the singing apps where you can select a scene, say who you're going to play in the scene, and then other people who want to join your scene can via the app. In fact, I was going to try to convince you to do one with me before we did the show, and then we could run through that fantastic performance because no doubt it would have been.
Oh, what movie were you thinking of?
I'm not sure. It was I think we probably would have done something, well, definitely Ready Player One-ish. I think this week it probably would be War Games. But we would flip for the Ali Sheedy part.
Yeah, I'd probably win that one. I'd want that one. You can be, I'll give you or David Lightman.
I don't know if you've seen that movie, Albert, but you're not that flexible.
That's very true. I don't look good in leg warmers either, to be honest. I've had many times.
Oh, don't sell yourself short.
Oh no, he looks good in shorts too.
I like this idea of flick syncs, and I've been thinking about so Jason, if there was any movie out there, like if you were put on the spot, or let's say you were in the Oasis and you had to go and you were trying to win this gate, if you could pick the movie that you wanted, what's a movie that you guarantee out of the gate you could actually name and recite every line from at least one of the characters in that movie?
Oh wow!
Do you have a movie like that?
The closest I would probably be able to get would be either Pulp Fiction or the Simpsons movie.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah.
Pulp Fiction's got deep dialogue. That's nicely played.
I've seen that movie so many times that once I actually start getting into the movie, I can talk along with it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's very similar. Like with War Games, he actually mentions in the novel, Wade, as he's going through it, and Parzival, as he's in the flick sync for War Games, he's kind of rough at first, but then once the movie's played on a little bit, he really gets into it and all that. So what about you, Will? Any particular movie? I know you got a couple. I can probably name a few of them.
I could do a lot of them. It's a curse.
Tombstone is one of them that you have.
Yeah, Tombstone for sure. That's a lock. That's all day.
That's
I'll take Tombstone quotes for 1,000, Alex. Let's make it a daily double. I'm gonna put it all in there. I think that A Few Good Men, The Princess Bride, which we were talking about before the show started. I'd say those 3 movies I could do pretty well locked.
Yeah. I don't know. I probably am being too modest. I can't think of a lot of movies that I can just every single line for. I definitely could do it with Star Wars Episode 4, including the opening crawl. I have that memorized. But I don't know. Beyond that, I can't think of anything else. Maybe Ready Player One. I've seen that movie quite a few times, to be honest.
And maybe Gladiator. I'd probably throw Gladiator in there too. I've watched that a billion times. Oh, yeah.
Mm.
Oh, but I mean, how many times did you watch Episode 1 when it came out? Like, you had tickets to every showing for like 4 days straight. It was insane.
That's probably true. I probably could do that one, put on the spot. Attack of the Clones, maybe not so much, but
just the Jar Jar.
Just the Jar Jar lines. Yeah.
Just the Jar Jar lines.
Knowing my luck, that's would be the challenge, right? You get thrown in. Actually, that'd be pretty easy. He doesn't really have that many lines.
You can keep your key, sir. I'm not saying this.
So the rules of a flick sync. Let's talk about, okay, you're in the Oasis and you're going through a flick sync. Here are the rules. So for every correct line of dialogue, you get 100 points. For every you get an action bonus value of 100 points. So if you do the mannerism that's happening while the movie's going on, that's 100 points. You get points for correct actions and timing, but he never really says in the novel like how many points that was. I'm going to assume it's 100 because that's pretty much what everything is. You also can get a final warning message. So after you've made 2 mistakes in a row, you get a final warning, which tells you, and he doesn't actually breach that. So we don't know what the repercussions are for getting the final warning or making the 3rd mistake. If you get 7 correct actions in a row, you get a cue card power up. So you get awarded a cue card so that if you do get stuck, you get to spend one of the cue cards and get your next line given to you or the next action given to you. And then you also get bonus points for delivering the lines with the exact tone and inflection as well. So it's more than just reciting the lines. It really is kind of encouraging and pushing you very much like, I guess, the movie Oki stuff. They want you to be kind of in that moment, in that scene and play the role of the character. So for him, he scores, I think, 100,000 points after he completes that first gate. And that puts our score, at least at this point in the novel, Parsifal's got 110,000, Artemis is at 9,000, and then James Halliday is still in places 3 through 10. So none of the Sixers have popped up on here. Sorrento hasn't popped up yet. Shoto, Daito, and H are all still kind of missing. So just quickly then. So, Will, based on what you heard just now about the rules of flick syncs, that sway anything for you? You think you could still nail all that, including body gestures, tone, inflection?
Yeah, I mean, is there another way to say movie lines? There's no other way to say them. Like we were talking about this last week when you guys were doing the worst Arnold Schwarzenegger impressions. Those would have all been minus 500 points. And we're all dumber from having heard it. Hey, so you know what I found interesting is in the book, they don't actually say it explicitly that all the other people that are playing through this are playing through war games. And, it leads to, hey, do you think Artemis played through war games also? Because I don't remember them explicitly saying it. Maybe they did, but I mean, it could have been a different movie for every person that played. Right? I don't know.
No. Yeah, that's true. I mean, they don't. Yeah, you're right. They don't say that. I think we just assume that they did go through this, which would then assume that all of them knew this movie that well that they would be able to get through all the lines and dialogue and actions and gestures and everything.
Look, Albert, we should both be able to do this. I mean, I think at one point or another in high school, we have each served as president of the International Thespian Society.
Yeah, we have. Let's see. So the scoring, so 110,000 is Parzival. So, and then also when he finishes this, he comes out and he goes from 10th level all the way up to 20th level. And just for note, the highest level in the Oasis is level 99, which eventually does reach. And I think there's other characters in there. So, before we go, the last thing I want to say about the movie Yoki, there was also the Kara movie, which is another kind of karaoke movie type thing. And then, do you guys ever play? Jason, were you an Xbox guy? Or are you a PS4 guy? Or do you care? Are you agnostic?
I've had all of them. So
Okay.
yeah, I had both the Xbox, the PS2. I've had pretty much all the consoles.
So there was a game that came out for the Xbox called You're in the Movies. It was in 2008, and I remember when the game came out, there was a lot of buzz around it, probably solely generated by Microsoft. I don't know how well the game is. Did either one of you ever play this game? It was kind of the same concept.
No, I didn't
No.
play this.
Mm-mm.
Okay, we're going to move on to our next topic here, and
Sorry we couldn't participate in your story.
I don't know. I should have done some research. I was like, surely I got some good odds here that one of the three of us have played this game. Anyway, the
You have
concept.
terrible odds.
Yeah, it
terrible.
sounds like a terrible game.
So, anyways, that was kind of the same thing. I don't know anything about this game, so if you're listening, watching, and you know something, let us know. I don't remember, but it was same concept. You had a movie, and I don't know if they were real movies. That may have been like made up movies, and then you participated in those made up movies, which seems even
That just now it's less fun. Wow, you're really selling this game. They're going to be flying off the shelves at GameStop after this podcast.
Yeah.
So there used to be a game from Lionhead Studios called The Movies, where you would actually create a movie studio and you could actually create movies in that movie studio. I mean, like real movies with little tunes and everything. And there was actually this kind of cult following where people were producing like real life movies.
Oh, like mimicking them in
tunes.
there.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And but I this doesn't sound like the same thing.
No, this is and you would stand in front of your camera, your Xbox camera thing, and it would record you, and then it put you in the movie, and you had dialogue and lines, you had to say it, that kind of thing. So I don't know.
So it was a Connect thing, yeah.
Yeah, it was probably one of these Connect things. All right. Well, let's talk about let's see. So he pulls an all-nighter. He's been up for 24 hours at this point in the novel after he comes out of the first gate here. And he literally just collapses and passes out right on the floor. And so I had this kind of a weird question because I'm just curious. But Will, what's the longest you've ever stayed up without any sleep? Why did you do it? And then how did you sleep afterwards?
Probably 3.5 days. As long as I stayed up, but it's.
Oh, were you in the military? What's going on here?
Yeah, when you're in the military, you would go to air base defense training, and part of your bivouac was sleep deprivation training. And yeah, it's all true. I mean, by day 3, you were basically in a warped episode of Fantasia. You're not seeing things too well. And I think everybody who's worked in the IT field at some point has pulled a 24, 48-hour shift, only because the nature of the business is you're going to bring something down on a Friday and it needs to be live in production by Monday morning. And inevitably, that never goes smoothly. Mm-hmm. So I could say just about everybody I work with, I don't know anybody who hasn't pulled at least a 24 to 48 hours straight.
Yeah. Jason, what about you? What's the longest you've ever gone?
So I was young and dumb a long time ago, and some friends and I.
Oh, these are the best stories, by the way. I was young and dumb. Keep going, please.
So some friends and I decided we wanted to see how long we could stay up. We made it probably close to 60 hours before we started hallucinating and decided we were done.
Yeah.
We were also playing a lot of the original Doom during this time. So when we started hallucinating sounds of the demons in the video game, when we weren't playing the video game, we decided to call it quits and go to bed.
The kicker of that story is you guys were dropping acid right before, and
what in the heck?
We're actually awake. No, I'm kidding.
This is a family show. So Jace, you would have stayed up way longer if you were in the military. If they were like shooting blank ammunition at you and throwing ground burst simulators, you can go way further than 60. I promise you.
Probably, yeah, but you're probably still hallucinating at that point, right?
You are.
I don't know that I've actually stayed up any longer. And mine is just as trivial. Like I don't have it like a cool story like I was in the military. I was just playing video games. Like we had a little club that we would get together on the weekends and play video games all weekend long. And it was not uncommon for us to get there on a Friday night, set up about 8 p.m. Mind you, this is like in the 90s. So we were hauling like 19-inch, 21-inch CRT monitors, not flat screens, but full CRT monitors, keyboard, desktop, mouse, power strips, chairs, fans, the whole thing. Take it over to the guy's house, set up Friday, 8 p.m., play all the way until the sun came up, and then keep on playing. And so I would say at most, I probably gone close to 24 hours of playing games straight without taking a break outside of, pooping, peeing, and eating.
That
And
sounds like it smells awful.
it does. It's horrible. And it's so hot, and we were always in this small room with not a lot of AC, not a lot of ventilation. You really get to know, who showered before coming over, who didn't. And we didn't, but that was the longest I've ever gone. And like even that 24 hours, like I can't, like I'm out. I start passing out. I'm just like completely weak. There's no way I can. And I have the problem driving too. Like if I'm driving more than like 4 hours, or it starts getting into about 10 p.m., I'm like dozing off, like at the wheel, which is really dangerous. So I just don't have the stamina to stay up late.
Yeah, not anymore. There's no way I would stay up for 60 hours anymore.
There's no good reason to do so at this point.
No.
Oh, there's always a reason.
Yeah, well, there could be.
You boys should party with us.
That's all right. The only other question I had was this, he has a dream at the very end. And Will, did you see any other kind of like meaning in this dream? And it's pretty straightforward, right? I mean, he's got the egg, all his friends are attacking him, everybody's pulling at it and ripping away. I mean, it's all symbolic of, him winning the prize and everybody wanting to go after him because he is the forerunner, and then eventually will win the whole thing. But anything else that you saw, any deeper meaning there? If not, you can make it up. I
think so. I mean, I could draw some imaginary lines, but for the most part, it seemed like he was just manifesting what he had been watching on the news, a couple days before that, leading up to this. I didn't find some deep conspiracy theory, unfortunately. And I do love conspiracy theories.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about the pop culture. So let me pull this up and we'll get started. I've got now there are a couple things on here that we're not going to talk about because we've talked about them before on other episodes. But let's start with this one. This is, if you guys don't know, this is Galaga and Zaxxon. Let me pull up my notes here. So, Will, you want to talk about Galaga, right? We've had a chance. We had a chance to talk about it in. Oh, let me think. I'm trying to think what episode that. It may have been like one of the first episodes that we did. But give me your. I know you've had a chance to really speak to this, but tell me exactly for Galaga and for Zaxxon. What are your memories of it? What did you like about it?
So I'm sure you guys already covered all the background of Galaga and what it is, and anyone who's listening to this podcast probably already knows it's a sequel to Galaxian. But what's more interesting to me is I remember Galaga being the first game that I cared about the box art, right? And so the box art for Galaga and the artist who did Galaga for the arcade was Mark Erickson. And I don't know if you know who that is, but he is probably, for the 80s era, the most influential artist in the video game scene. He did about 90 arcades and NES box art covers, including the infamous Mega Man 2, which everyone criticized him for. But he also did the Tengen version of Tetris, Prisoners of War, Pole Position 2, Choplifter, Heavy Barrel, iCar Warrior 3, and about 90s others. And so he is considered to be the statesman of retro gaming artistry. And so he did this font, and he also did the art. And I wish we had to show your viewers the actual Galaga art, because it puts a twist on the story of Galaga, because this is an era where there wasn't a lot of background given on the video games that you were playing.
Yeah.
But if you look at the box art for Galaga, the enemy aircraft that they refer to as aliens are piloted by two humans, every one of them. So it makes you wonder, because they never really specify that you're defending humanity or anything like that. You're just trying to defeat, these Galaga alien invaders. But which one are we?
We covered Galaga too, and I don't remember breaking that down at all. So,
well, you should have called some more nerds, because we're all over it. How about you, Jason? Were you big into this era? Did you play Galaga Zaxxon this type?
Oh yeah. So I played plenty of Galaga in the arcade. Never was really good at it. I think once I hit the double ships, I always got way too cocky and ended up losing the double ships really fast. I really loved Zaxxon. That was one of my favorite games in the arcade. And I remember I got a hand-me-down 2600 when I was about 8 or 10 years old, somewhere around there, and saw Zaxxon at Toys R Us. And so I begged my parents to get me that. And once I got Zaxxon home, I was so disappointed because it looked nothing like the arcade.
Welcome to the Atari 2600.
Yeah. And, I should have realized.
Shocking.
I should have realized that it wasn't going to, because nothing ever did. But yeah, I loved Zaxxon in the arcade. I really wanted to play it at home. And I think I touched it twice and never touched it again. I was so disappointed in it.
Yeah. And it's such a great arcade game. Like, well, both of these are. and their home releases were Galaga was had a probably better shot at getting closer. But you're right, Zaxxon, just that whole isometric viewpoint. It would be several years in different generations of consoles before we got anything close to the a true arcade copy for both of these games, really. Even like the Nintendo versions. I mean, even like when we get into like the 16
easy killer,
60-bit, yeah, there's still
easy
like,
on the 8-bit. I think Galaga's almost a perfect port on the NES.
I would say this one is.
It was released really late in the life cycle for the Nintendo. It wasn't released until '88. So at that point, they had figured that whole thing out.
Yeah, they definitely got better. But yeah, you're right. Like some of the first ones, there were just something missing about a lot of those games. And so, sorry, I forgot to read the reference. So the reference for Galaga and for Zaxxon, so the first one says, I found myself standing in an old arcade video game playing Galaga. The game was already in progress. I had double ships and a score of 41,780 points. So this is when you would tap out, Jason. You never got the double ship. So
no.
And then we did cover that in the We Die episode. So that was in 0001. And then for Zaxxon and Dig Dug, which we're going to talk about, the reference here says, keeping one eye on the game, I tried to make sense of my surroundings. In my peripheral vision, I was able to make out a Dig Dug game on my left and a Zaxxon machine on my right. And so here in the novel, he's talking about as he's playing David Lightman. And I've got a picture of this when we get into War Games at the very end of the show. I've got a picture where it shows the games. It's got, obviously Galaga in the middle, Dig Dug on the left, and Zaxxon on the right. But let's get into Dig Dug, because this is a game that I personally really loved. And there are certain games, I've said this before on the show, when you go into an arcade, right, you'd always scope out for those certain games that were kind of automatically, you're going to at least put one quarter in, maybe more. And then after that, once you got your fix in, you'd probably maybe venture out, take a look at some of the other ones. But this is definitely one of the ones that I had an eye out for, right? I was looking for it every time. So let me give you just real quick, and then Jason, I'll start with you here on this one. So this was Dig Dug, came out in 1982. It was developed by Namco and released by Atari here in the U.S. It was programmed by Shiguchi Ishimura and Shoichi Fukatini. There we go. I did not practice that. The premise.
No.
So Dig Dug was a strategic digging game where you ran around underground digging and pumping enemies full of air using a bike pump until they popped, or by dropping rocks on them. Each level progressively became more difficult as the enemies grew in numbers and moved faster on the screen. You completed each level by defeating all of the enemies. And I've got some video here that I'm going to run. Which, first off, I love this artwork. This is all really cool stuff. And it stood out for me, like compared to the other marquees on a lot of the video games at the time. Although every one of those was probably very unique. But I'm going to run this in the background while we go ahead and talk about this. But Jason, was this a game that you jumped into at all? What's your experience here with Dig Dug?
So my experience with Dig Dug was at a few convenience stores that I frequented as a kid. And it was a game that I never understood how to play. I was so horrible at this game. This game would eat quarters just like candy. I would pump in quarters trying to figure it out. I could dig around okay, and then the monsters would eat me. So I never figured out how to blow up monsters. I was still probably 6-8 years old whenever this game was popular. So
you were attracted to the colors and the music.
Oh yeah, it looked great. I mean, it looked better than a lot of arcade games of that time. But I just never figured it out.
Well, what about you?
Yeah,
arcade classic for you?
It is. It's an arcade classic for anyone who loves arcades. I mean, when you're looking at Dig Dug, it's one of the 20 best-selling arcade games of all time. It ranks 19th, so it's tucked neatly between NBA Jam and Mortal Kombat. So it sold over 22,000 units. Adjusted, it made a ton of money at the time. Interestingly, this, for all its popularity and being on top 100 lists for virtually every arcade list there is, this game did not get a port to the NES. So for that reason,
not even a homebrewer. No one's done like a legal. Oh,
there's homebrews of literally everything, right? I think you can get one of that Sega Genesis game with that chick from Different Strokes in it.
Oh, Night Trap.
Yeah, Night Trap.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
1994, I think. But anyways, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, the only game ported to the NES was the sequel, which is Dig Dug 2: Trouble in Paradise. I don't know if you've
terrible game.
It is a terrible game, as most of the spin-offs are terrible, but that was the first point that Dig Dug actually got his name assigned to him. Before that, they just called him Dig Dug, but after that, he was Taizo Hori, which is a play on words for Hore Taizo, which in Japanese means I want to dig. So there's some useless trivia for you.
Yeah. I played this one quite a bit. In fact, I can recall, kind of like what Jared was saying, when I grew up, there was my father and my grandfather would take me to a bar. I know it sounds terrible already. But by those standards back then, this was a privilege. So I get to go with them to the bar. They'd go order a ton of beer, smoke cigarettes, and I would sit there next to two games. There was Dig Dug and there was Galaga, and so and Centipede. Now the Centipede was there as well. But yeah, these three games were always there. So anytime this was available, I would certainly play it. And I can't like you, Jason. I don't know that I was ever really amazing at this game. I certainly loved playing it. I love the concept of it, right? Being able to kind of dig where you wanted to, and being able to use the bike pump to pump them up, which I never realized was a bike pump. That was not clear to me based on the graphics. And then squishing the enemies, right? You'd get underneath the rock and wait, and then move out the last minute, and that rock would come down and squish all these. And my video's not running anymore, so I guess we're done with the video. But I really enjoyed this game. And then when the sequel came out, I remember when that was available, it was kind of a big deal. It was horrible. Like it wasn't recognizable because they went from a top-down view almost. It's kind of a weird. I don't know. The camera angle was completely different, and it just did not feel like the same game whatsoever.
He got a new weapon though. Got a jackhammer in that game.
Did he?
Didn't save the game, but still, just saying.
I was going to say, because I don't remember him having a jackhammer, but then I couldn't make out the bike pump in the first game, so who knows, right?
Dig Dug's made a bit of a resurgence, so your kids might actually know what this game is if they're looking at it. It was
Minecraft.
No, because it was in Stranger Things 2. In fact, episode 5 of Stranger Things 2 is called Dig Dug, and it's the episode where they're going through the tunnels. Actually serves as an important plot point in Stranger Things 2, because Dustin, I think you know who that is, that character is playing Dig Dug and has the high score, and is ultimately his high score is beat by Mad Max in the show. So Dig Dug all over Stranger Things 2. So the kids might know what you're talking about when you're talking to them about this.
What's funny too is like when they came back. So there is a third version of the game called Dig Dug. Arrangement. Is that what it's got a weird, like, it doesn't even make sense. I think it's called Dig Dug Arrangement, whatever that means. Like they obviously didn't run this through the US like translation thing, but they went back to the original concept where you're, top to bottom, left to right, 2-dimensional. It's not this 3D thing, but it had like maps and all kinds of weird stuff. But it was way more familiar than obviously the second one was. So, and then the other thing, go ahead.
Hey, here's a trivia question for you, Albert. How much money in revenue do you think this video game made?
Do I get multiple choice?
No, I'm going to say that both you and Jace get to guess. The one who's closest gets nothing.
Sweet. Can't wait. Okay, so how much revenue? This is coin revenue from the arcade?
Yep, coin revenue from the arcade.
All arcades?
Yep, in the 80s. All 22,228 of them.
Jason, you're a guest. You can, our host, you can go first.
I'll give you a point of reference. Pac-Man in its life during the 80s made 7.6 billion with a B.
Oh, yeah. Not that.
I'm going to say about 3.5 billion.
Whoa. No.
I'm going to go with 3.5 billion and one. No, I'm going to go with
$1.
$1. I'm going to have to queue up the Price is Right music during this segment, so get ready for it. You've heard it now. I'm going to go with 780,000.
113 million. So y'all were both couldn't be much more wrong. We're never playing that game again.
That was a terrible game. 130 million. I don't know. Is that good? I don't know if that's relevant. I mean, it seems kind of weak compared to Pac-Man, but then again, Pac-Man was
Pac-Man. Yeah, but for the time, it was pretty freaking good. I mean, you didn't really see revenue for games go into the billions until like the 90s. Like Mortal Kombat made about 1.8 billion in its lifespan, just that kind of just shows you what a phenomenon Pac-Man was at the time.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it was a juggernaut for back then. All right,
For now, forever, like it
continues.
Nothing's beat it. Nothing has ever beat Pac-Man.
Anything else on this one before we get out of here?
No, I think we've kicked the horse. What do you think there, Jason?
No, I think we should move on. The horse is dead.
All right. Well, let's move into the next reference, I should say. So it says, it wasn't my avatar's face I saw there. It was Matthew Broderick's face, a young pre-Ferris Bueller and pre-Lady Hawk Matthew Broderick. So the two movies I've got here, now we've talked about both of these in previous episodes, so we won't do full deep dives into these, but Ferris Bueller came out in 1986. This was covered in Chapter 2. Lady Hawk came out in 1985. And I think it was Crowley that was on that show. It was either Crowley or Mike, one of the two, and I forget which episode it was, but we have kind of done that. So feel free to listen in on both of those at some point. But hey, Jason, are these movies were you a big fan of these movies, growing up at the time? Have you seen them? What's your liking here?
Oh yeah. So Ferris Bueller I actually did see in theaters.
Nice.
Lady Hawk I did not see in theaters, but I did see it on VHS, a couple years after it had released.
Well, we can't all be perfect, Jason. I'm sorry.
Of the two, I do enjoy Ferris Bueller more. Lady Hawk is a fine movie. It's funny. It's not a great movie, but it is a fun movie.
All right, well, give me your takes here. If I'll give you a softball question. If you had to pick one of these movies, which one would you pick? Ferris Bueller's Day Off or Lady Hawk?
You can't make me watch Lady Hawk.
Oh,
that movie
what?
It's so boring.
No,
Ferris Bueller's Day Off is a great film. I mean,
it is.
And I like in the spirit of conspiracy theories, I do love the whole "there's no Ferris" conspiracy theory, and it's just Cameron's alter ego throughout the movie. I do love that. But watch it from that. It's like the first time you did the whole Wizard of Oz Dark Side of the Moon thing. It'll blow your mind.
Yeah. That theory, if you're not familiar with it, it's kind of like it. Yeah, it's kind of like what Will said. The theory is that Ferris Bueller is really not. He's just the alter ego, and people are all kind of making this stuff up. But I didn't. Loved both of these movies. Probably okay. I won't say equally because that's not fair.
You were
Ferris Bueller.
Man, I was about to pull this Cat 6 cable out of this computer and start talking nonsense like that.
Ferris Bueller is probably a better movie. Probably. But I do like Lady Hawk, and this is kind of what we talked about on the show back when we did Lady Hawk. I've always liked the movie because of the music. The movie itself has some problems, and probably music's not a reason to really like a movie if you think about it. But I do enjoy it. I do enjoy both of them. I mean, the key takeaway here is you can see by his faces. I mean, this kid was a baby at the time. I think he was, I don't know, I think he was only like 20 or maybe, 17 when he did, what is it, War Games? 18? So he was very young, nonetheless. But yeah, if I had to pick one of these, I would say Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And Ferris, and I mentioned this on the show when we covered this, Ferris was somebody who I aspired to be. There were a few people in high school and that I really wanted to be when I grew up. And Ferris Bueller was definitely one of them. Never quite achieved that level of notoriety, but got pretty close at one point in my life. And then Lady Hawk, obviously gets ragged on throughout this book, right? And the novel, they're always given, H is giving a bunch of crap throughout the novel because Parzival Wade likes Lady Hawk. And we know that Halliday likes Lady Hawk, especially when, the reason this reference also comes up is was it the last chapter, right? When the Conan movie music was playing as he was playing Dungeons of Daggerath, when it flipped over, the cassette flipped over to the other side, it started playing the soundtrack to Lady Hawk. And so that was his way of, he kind of made a comment in that particular chapter about how, if H could have heard that, because, he took a bunch of crap for liking Lady Hawk. So look at that. JR is with me here too. Look at that. Lady Hawk is great. Have the score on vinyl. Thank you.
Dang.
On vinyl. Dropping vinyl on this one.
Oh, somebody who's serious about his Lady Hawk music.
Serious about his.
Hey, the only way to listen to music from the 80s is on vinyl. That's real talk. Respect, JR.
Yeah. All right. We got two more movies here that are, just minor references. So we're not going to dive into either one of these too much as well. But we got Real Genius and Better Off Dead. And the reference is, without even knowing it, I totally over-prepared. I probably knew War Games even better than I knew Real Genius and Better Off Dead. So Parzival or Wade is saying that these are two other movies, like kind of like I posed a question earlier about which movies would you be able to recite. These are two other movies for him, Real Genius and Better Off Dead. And Real Genius, this is like by this point, I need to go back and just do a count in the novel, but this is like the third time, and there's more. Like this is a movie that comes up a lot throughout the novel, and I don't, it probably one of Ernie Klein's favorite movies, I would have guessed, since he had so many stinking references in there. Same thing with War Games. So Jason, Real Genius, Better Off Dead. I don't think either one of these would make it on to Smoking and Drinking in Space, but
actually, Real Genius is on the list.
Is it on the list? That's awesome.
On the list, yeah, because of the theoretical laser that they're doing. It's considered sci-fi.
Yeah. When you get to it, I want to hear your guys' take on the popcorn scene when the laser hits the popcorn and fills the house with all the popcorn.
Yeah.
But yeah, so how are you feeling about these movies? These guys resonate with you?
Oh yeah. So I've seen Real Genius, several times. Better Off Dead is one of my favorite movies. I love John Cusack in that movie.
Yeah.
That's just a classic movie. I love the irreverence in that entire movie. And the $2. That's a reference that I still throw out every once in a while.
Anytime somebody says $2, it's like you can't help but go $2.
Yeah.
I want my $2. And half the time people look at it like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why are you wearing that hat? Take off the shoulder bag. Well, I know you haven't had a chance. What about these two guys? This guy, your boy Val Kilmer in there.
Yeah, I love Val Kilmer. And I guess real talk, I think that's who probably I aspired to be in high school, but was probably more like the nerdy dude who was hanging out with Val Kilmer for the whole film. Oh, FYI, there is exactly 4 references to Real Genius in the book.
Nice.
But those are direct references. Like he might make character references in other places.
Yeah. The excuse me, for better, we talked about Better Off Dead, and I really wanted to spend, I can't remember why we didn't get to spend as much time, but that is a movie that I can't probably quote every line from it, but there are a lot of really great quotes in Better Off Dead. Sorry, Ricky, your mom blew up, or sorry, your mom blew up, Ricky. Every time the two guys in the car, the Asian guys, which I can't remember, one of them is he plays the from Karate Kid 2. He's what's that guy's name now? I can't remember his name. But anyways,
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, he plays that character as well, but he does the Howard Cosell voice, and truly a sight to see. Just great lines throughout all of that. And I swear, like the other thing about this movie, Better Off Dead, what's his face? The guy that plays Booger.
Curtis Armstrong.
Yeah.
Curtis Armstrong.
We've got a lot of Curtis Armstrong going on this week.
Oh, we do. And it's like, this to me seems like the same character that was in Risky Business as the same character that was in, like he plays all the same characters.
It's a single universe. It's just one universe. He's in all of them. He connects them all.
Right, yeah.
And it wasn't like he was incredibly young at the time. I mean, he was already in his mid-20s when he started making these films. He was 28 when he made Risky Business.
I know.
He was going to college.
He wasn't supposed to be in high school. Like he wasn't even close. Like, oh yeah, yeah. Didn't Klein? Yes, he has publicly said that. I think it's a combination of a number of characters. And then there's some next episode we'll get into Mary Jo Powell, who was Gary Gygax's wife. So there's some things there that were influencing him to when he created Samantha, her real name, obviously. But yeah. So, anyways, both these movies are phenomenal, and I wish we could talk about more, but we don't have the time. Okay, but let's get into this. All right. So these are I've got Chosen. Sorry, yeah, Chosen. That was his name. Karate Kid 2. All right. Up on the screen, I'm showing Ford Thunderbirds, and the reference here is this is when he's in Middletown. The car, the one that wasn't on blocks, was a 1982 Ford Thunderbird. The engine started on the second try. I backed out of the driveway and drove to the bus station. And so I've got all of the Thunderbirds up here, and not the TV show, not the anime, the actual Ford Thunderbirds from 1955 to 1988. This was considered a personal luxury vehicle. They had a total of 11 generations that were made over the course of 50 years. And I got to say, man, some of these are like cool looking, and some of them are, whoa, like I don't know what the appeal was here, but let's start with.
Most of them aren't appealing.
Most of them aren't appealing. Okay, Jason. So I'm going to ask you, if you had to pick one of these Thunderbirds, like all the years listed here, which one would you pick?
Oh, I would pick Gen 1.
Gen
the
1?
Original, yeah, the original 50 to 50 or 55 to 57 Thunderbird.
What about you, Will?
I'm not driving any of these.
What? Why?
There's just no way. Like, I don't wear jewelry and I don't wear a lot of like name brand clothing, but I love cars. I'm not getting in any of these. Like if I'm in one of these at any point in our future, Albert, things have gone horribly wrong in my life.
It's all falling apart.
Although keeping this in mind, that 72 to 76 that's down there, I believe that Albert's showing on the slide, I believe that's the car that's chasing the Porsche in Risky Business that we'll talk about later.
It might be.
We can just get into the math of how that shouldn't have been a race.
But there is no way should have been able to keep up. Like after that second turn, or even on any of the straightaways, there's just no way.
Yeah, no, that was a 79 928, and I do love Porsches. So
I got a picture for you later. So
oh, good. Well, then I'll talk about this later because I am going to talk about that car.
Okay, before we, I don't know which one I would pick. I'm going to go with the one that looks like the Sebring. No, I'm kidding. That's a Office reference. No, I would go with probably the 58 to 61, not the first gen, second gen. Yeah, no, it's just got more fins. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love that first gen one because it's so whacked. I mean, it looks like a classic car to me. But there's just a lot more details, a lot more going on. It's real busy on the sides there for the 58 to 60 model.
Yeah, it's that front end that kills it for me.
Yeah, now that you say that.
Yeah, you're going to love it once that power steering kicks in.
Yeah, I don't know about that. But all right, so I got one other thing too. So there were a number of famous Thunderbirds throughout movies, and some of the ones that I was able to find, and trust me, I spent all of about 10 seconds looking here, but I was able to find there was a 1966 Thunderbird in Thelma and Louise. So Thelma and Louise, 1991 film. They were driving around in Thunderbird. So that would have been 1966. I guess it's this one up here, the red one.
It's fourth gen, yeah.
Yeah, fourth gen. Then there was a 1966 T-Bird in The Outsiders, which is a 1983 film. It's got
never heard of it.
Yeah, whatever. And that was, let's see, 66, the same model in that one.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to do that. Then there was a 1957 Thunderbird in Sin City. You guys ever seen Sin City?
That is an awesome film.
Awesome film, yeah.
So,
awesome film.
I think you guys know what scene I'm talking about, too. They show a lot where he's driving around. That's actually a Thunderbird. So that would have been a 57. So that would have been first gen. There you go, Jason.
Okay, I've changed my boat. I'd drive that car. If it's in Sin City, I'm driving it.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah. JR says there's one in Thunderball. I'll drive that one too.
Okay. And I think that was a first gen, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong, but I think that was a first gen in Thunderball. I don't have that one on here. I do have, there was another one from Bruce Springsteen's I'm on Fire video. I don't know how big of the boss you guys are, but there was a 1956 Thunderbird. So that would have been Gen 1. And the last one that I came up with was a 57 T-Bird in the True Blue video by Madonna. So that one's for you, Will.
Thanks.
I don't know why, but so anyways, the Thunderbird has been out for a long time, and I just don't understand what was going on here. Like in the 80s, like this is not appealing. That's not appealing.
It was the hangover from the 70s. I think it was just they were trying to right the ship, and I don't think there was writing in the ship after the 70s.
Yeah,
my grandfather had a 79 Thunderbird, and I got to drive it around.
Let's look at that one. Whoa,
yeah,
that's a big boy.
It was a land yacht. It drove like a boat.
What color was it?
It was yellow, kind of this
like
beige
dirty
yellow. Yeah,
beige
it was gross, but I mean, it had a big engine. It would go, and it was comfortable, but it was huge, and it rocked like a boat.
Yeah, I think they started slimming down at that too. I think what I read was the 72 to 76. This brown piece of crap down here. This guy was the heaviest Thunderbird that they ever created, or T-Bird that they created. The other T-Birds I like are the ones from Greece. So, and I meant to put a picture up. I had a joke and all, and I forgot to put a slide in here. But it was going to say, it's great Thunderbirds. All right.
What happened to the Danny I fell in love with over the summer? I don't know. Why don't you check the yellow pages? It's the best line in that movie.
All right, let's move on from
another movie that he would be able to do.
Yeah. Yeah. It probably is. We'll talk more Grease in a little bit here. Don't worry. Because it's funny you said that because I got some Grease stuff coming up.
Nothing
Okay.
like 3 men in a Grease conversation. It's gonna be fantastic. Stay tuned, folks. You're gonna want to turn your headphones up.
We are going to get into Risky Business. And so this was written and directed by Paul Brickman, starring Maverick from Top Gun, the girl from Risky Business, and one of the good-looking Fratelli boys from The Goonies. The synopsis says, a Chicago teenager is looking for fun at home while his parents are away. This is like a super light family synopsis. A Chicago teenager is looking for fun at home while his parents are away, but the situation quickly gets out of hand. Wow, that's
an understatement.
An understatement if there ever was one. I mean, this is prostitution and extortion, a couple other things going on here in this movie. All right, so there's a lot to talk about here, and I've got a lot of different slides that we'll get into. But Will, on this movie, when were you? How old? Here's a question I always have for these movies: how old were you when you saw this movie for the first time? And do you remember this experience? Because I do, but I may not be speaking for everybody. For me, it just seems like it's one of those movies when you watch it as a kid, especially if you grew up in the 80s, that you're like, wow, I don't know if I should be watching this.
Yeah, I don't think it had I think I was too young to have the L train scene do anything for me. Like I knew she, she's obviously attractive, but I think the first time I watched this, my favorite parts of the movies were the car chases, the dancing because who hasn't done that in the living room? And that was about it.
Oh, in the
That's about it. Yeah.
Jason, what about you?
So I was actually a teenager the first time I saw this. I didn't see it until maybe almost 10 years after it was released. There was an 80s Halloween party that was happening, and
at the church.
Yeah, at the church. That's it. And so we were going to go as the dudes from Risky Business, and we had never seen the movie, so we watched the movie, rented it, watched it, and we had a lot of fun with that.
Yeah. And this happens at the tail end of the movie, or tail end of the chapter. Let me just quickly on the references. He's talking about the egg. He says, I looked down at my body. It wasn't Parzival's body. It was my own. And I was wearing armor made of paper. In my right hand was a toy plastic sword. And in my left hand was a large glass egg. It looked exactly like the glass egg that causes Tom Cruise's character so much grief in Risky Business. But somehow I knew, in the context of my dream, it was supposed to be Halliday's Easter egg. All right. This, man, I would say this movie, like the L train scene, I had questions as a kid, like what was happening there. Like, I don't really understand. I don't know what was going on.
Hey, call me later. I'll tell you. I got the whole internet right here. I'll show you.
I don't have questions now, but I did at the time. I'm pretty clear, I think, on at least what's happening. She's obviously getting a ride of some sort on the train. And so this, here, the one, as I was rewatching this movie, like this opening scene here with them, like there's a lot of product placement throughout this movie. Everything from the Schlitz malt liquors there, the old Milwaukees, the Coke cans. Later on, he does the plug for the Porsche, accept no substitution, which was their kind of tagline back in the day. And I never realized that was Balky. Like even, yeah. Even as I was watching this, it wasn't until I saw it recently that I realized that, oh my gosh, this is Balky in this movie. And of course, we talk about Booger in there as well, but these guys are pretty young, pretty up and coming too. I don't know. I'm probably overselling them too much and saying that.
No, this was the first movie for both those guys. This was their first on-screen performance, both for Serge and for Booger, and for Tammy too from Parks and Rec, Megan Mullally. This was her first film.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. She was in. Oh man, yeah.
She's one of the prostitutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there are a lot of prostitutes and a lot of prostitution in this movie.
This is it's like a dark situational comedy. That's exactly what this movie is. It's just pile on after pile on of what can go wrong next.
It always felt like it was like a more grown up version of Home Alone. Maybe not. I don't know if that's true.
I also think this house layout is the same from Modern Family. If you ever watched that show, it's almost the exact same layout. When I was rewatching it, I was like, is this the house from Modern Family? Because they're like right in the front door, up the stairs to the left of the living room, and then another right into the kitchen.
The Cosbys had that same layout too.
Yeah.
No, I mean like exactly. They have the same banister, the same stair finishes.
I don't know. Was it the same set?
I doubt it. That's a long time ago.
It was.
Yeah, I've seen them use like buildings and offices over and over again for different movies, but I don't know if they'd ever keep a setup for that long. Let's see. So we talked about the poker scene already. This scene right here is iconic, right? I mean, it's been done so many times. I mean, I was going to put in like a list of all of the times people have done this. It's too long. I mean, I couldn't, and there's been so many great ones and some really bad ones at that. If you got it to YouTube and type in risky business underwear scene or something like that, you'll get all kinds of hits back from, famous people do it, but there's a lot of home videos that people have done.
I'd be worried what you got back. You're not just going to get returns from this movie. If
oh my goodness, you don't. Yeah, I don't recommend that, children. If you're listening,
it's not safe for work to do that Google search, folks.
It was. There's quite a few the hits that come back. Not all of them are appropriate. But
Albert, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
So, throughout the 80s, a lot was made of the Brat Pack, and we've covered some Brat Pack movies already, and we'll do it more in the future, I'm sure. But two actors who are commonly associated with the Brat Pack, but aren't official members, are both Tom Cruise and Matthew Broderick, although neither one of them are in John Hughes films, right? So if you had to make a case for one of the two being a Brat Pack member, which one would it be?
I'd probably say Tom Cruise.
Yeah?
Yeah, I don't say that because I like him anymore, but when I think of like other movies that he's been in, and some of the actors he's been with, they were Brat Pack actors. I mean, you could say the thing about Tom.
Yeah,
Matthew Broderick as well.
Broderick was in War Games with Ali Sheedy.
Yeah,
yeah,
he's part of that crew too. Oh, that's a really good question. I don't know that I guess Tom Cruise came to mind at first, but the more I think about it, I don't really have a solid opinion. What about you, Jason? You got?
I would say Broderick. I think he's been in more movies with Brat Pack actors than Tom Cruise. Because after Top Gun, Tom Cruise kind of moved his career more away from those angsty early 20s movies.
Right. And I agree with Jason. I think Matthew Broderick's roles have that more of a John Hughes feel to them. I mean, outside of this film, I mean, what are you going to count, like Taps, or what are you going to count as your Brat Pack film list for this guy? Oh, but here's a little connection between the two movies that we'll be talking, or we have talked about already. So both this movie and Ferris Bueller's Day Off, they both take place in the same city, Highland Park, Illinois, just outside Chicago. In fact, both of the addresses used in the film and both of those films are real, and they are less than 2 blocks from one another. So Cameron's house and Joel's house are less than 2 blocks from each other on a map.
Nice.
Of Highland Hills. I
wonder if that I'm sure that's in a tour of some sort, a movie tour in that city, if you ever went to it.
I'm sure it is.
Yeah. So what was it with the early 80s in Chicago or the suburbs of Chicago as a scene for all these movies? I know John Hughes grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, but I mean, it wasn't just John Hughes movies that this affected.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it was kind of a big thing. I don't know. Maybe it was the Bulls. Maybe it was their dynasty. I don't know.
Calm down.
I was trying to think of a good reason. I don't know. It's a good question. Maybe it was just cheaper to film there or set them up there. I mean, Hollywood had maybe done other cities or areas over and over again too much that people were burnt out in New York and California and wanted something bigger or better. I don't know. I mean, we got Cloak and Dagger down in San Antonio, so
yeah. I don't know. True. We also had Knight Rider 2020, so there you go.
Right. And the REM video for Everybody Hurts.
Hey, that was a great video.
All right. Well, I don't know how we went down that rabbit hole, but I got some more pictures here. We talked about, and big shocker. This whole scene here with him in his under was a big improv, right? There was no direction given to him. He just came out and started dancing around his skimmies and became a, icon because of that. There's a picture of Tom Cruise. He looks all of about 13 right there in that picture. That's him and Balky looking at each other. Here's the egg, which is interesting because the egg is in here, and the egg means something obviously to Ready Player One fans and people that are fans of the book and novel and the movie. But this is interesting enough. This egg wasn't. I went to try to go find it on eBay. Like I was thinking, okay, somebody's probably got an egg out there that you can buy that looks exactly like the egg that was in Risky Business. I couldn't find one, to be honest. And it turns out this particular egg was only made, I think they made like I think it was like $1,000 total for, to buy it when it came out. And I forget the name of the company. I had it's somewhere in my notes, and now I'm drawing a blank on where it was. But this company still is out there today. I mean, they still make glass things of all time. But when the recession hit in the 80s, they stopped making this egg. And so now it's like treasured. Like it runs a pretty penny. And again, I don't have anything to back it up other than people just anecdotally saying that it costs a lot of money to find one of these things.
Did you read that on the internet?
I did.
Because if you did, that's all you need.
That's right. No, I completely believe everything I read on the internet.
Has to be true. It's on the internet.
Yeah, so the company was called Steuben Glassworks. The designer of this particular egg in the movie was named Jan Johannesson. It was created in 1983. It was 14 centimeters tall. It was stopped making it around, I think, 1985. And yeah, the retail price at the time was $1,000. So there you go. If someday if I find this thing, I'll come back and give you guys an update. All right, let's move on from that egg. I don't know what she's doing here. Like, what does she want?
You know what she wants.
Rebecca De Mornay. Did she do anything else beyond this?
Yes.
Pull that up. Look, I can't remember. I'm trying to think if...
Was she in Hand the Rock the Cradle? Was she in that? Oh, no, she was in that.
Research on the fly on Satis.
Yeah. Look, I bet somebody who's like watching live has already Googled it. She did a bunch of stuff. She was in that thing with the one guy, and then she did the other one.
So she was in the Three Musketeers, Never Talk to Strangers.
Identity. Wait, which
version? Which one?
1993 version.
Oh, the best version.
That's the one with Keith Sutherland and
yeah.
Yep.
I don't remember anybody else.
She was in Lords of Dogtown, Wedding Crashers, Mother's Day, the miniseries adaptation of The Shining, and Jessica Jones.
TV show on Netflix.
Oh, she was also in Backdraft.
Oh, well, there's a joke in there somewhere.
It's like right on the surface.
That's right.
It's floating.
Right. That's Rebecca De Mornay. She's pretty. I liked her. I mean, she was, I don't know. I don't know. All right, we're not gonna get into that. Okay, here's this is the infamous scene. We talked about this when we were talking about Ray-Ban sunglasses in a couple episodes ago. But this is the silliest thing he does in this whole movie, which it goes well, I guess. But this is where he finally gives in to the fact that he's not going to go to Princeton. He's ended up going to, what was it, Iowa? Or what was
University of Illinois.
University of
Illinois.
Yeah.
We've done some really good work here, haven't we, Joel? But it's not quite Ivy League material now, is it? Bob.
Sometimes you got to say. All right. Well, don't say that. Let's see. Here's this is them just riding the train. Nothing happening here. Nothing to see. And I do not have a photo of the really bad part. Okay.
Now, I will say, if you're looking at that outfit he has, I rocked a very similar suit to this to one of our banquets in high school. Yes.
Oh, did you really? Were you inspired by this, or was that all we could put together?
I think that's probably all we had for a jacket.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about the Porsche. So this, well, I'll let you take it over. Well, I know you're a big Porsche fan. It's obviously shown. I'll be stupid and say that I always thought this was a French car because Porsche and not German. Thanks, Jason. I appreciate that.
What in the world?
Well, no, don't get me wrong. I mean, this isn't like something that was like yesterday that I realized this. This was a long time ago.
Okay. While I was researching for the show.
No. Breaking news. Porsche is not French.
I thought this was the elegant version of the Yugoslavian Yugo.
No, not at all.
It's the only thing that survived.
But this is a 1979 Porsche 929. And do you remember who was the guy that we?
This is a 928.
928. Right, so, sorry. Yep.
Yeah. They used three of them.
Yes. Wait, hold on. Before we get, I know you're just chomping at the bit to talk about this vehicle. Who was that guy that we grew up with? I think you were living with him at one point who had the red Porsche. Do you remember this?
Yeah. So it was his dad's, and it was a very risky business sans prostitution story. So Jason, who I'm still friends with on social media, right, lived about 2 blocks from Albert. We moved in together, and his dad had a Porsche. Weren't really supposed to be driving it, so we drove it up to Enchanted Rock And we weren't drinking because honestly, we weren't cool enough to be drinking in high school. Just a bunch of nerds driving around in the dark. But we managed to drive it over a hill, through a fence, and into a tree and total it. Nobody got injured. And we didn't have the opportunity to, make the money to repair it through prostitution because his dad had to come pick us up.
Oh, man.
Oh, no. That was an awkward ride home.
It was. I was in the back seat. I didn't do anything.
Right. Yeah. It had nothing to do with it. I don't, I remember something happened with it. I don't think I knew the full story though, in terms of what happened to it. I was friends with Jason as well, but there was and this is really off topic here, but there was another guy that was living in that house too. Who was the other guy? Cause this is the guy that would sell his body to like pharmaceutical companies for money. Do you remember that?
Yeah. He was a manager at McDonald's and like gave us all our sustenance for like a year by bringing home trash bags full of old burgers and then throwing them in the freezer. We would microwave them. We had nuggets by the thousands. It was disgusting. He was the world's biggest Kiss fan. He was a huge Kiss fan. He was a huge Miami Dolphins fan. That's all I remember about that dude.
I remember going over to the house to visit you. But there were things that stood out. And I remember like the Porsche. I remember Madden 93 and the Genesis because they had that. Or maybe it was Madden 94, one of them. And that was all that was ever played. And then the other thing that stood out for me was outside of Jason was just that other dude who had pinpricks all over his arms. And he was telling me about bone marrow that he'd done. And yeah, he was going to lose a testicle, but he's going to get like $1,500. I mean, just weird stuff coming out of that guy.
He sold a testicle for $1,500.
I think so. I don't know. I may be making that up. But it was stuff
that doesn't sound like a true story.
I don't know. That's how I walked away with it all. Some really shady stuff going on there, and I didn't know he worked at McDonald's. This is all starting to make sense now for me. All right. Well. All right. So here you go. Here's the 928. This is actually one of the real vehicles, and it's called Risky, and they take it around to car shows and everything else. But so I know, Will, you're a big fan of Porsche vehicles. Do you still own one today? Don't you?
No, my last Porsche caught on fire.
Oh no!
That's
what
a
happened?
True story. The heating element failed and literally burnt up while it was in valet parking at La Cantera. But true story. So
wow, I didn't know that. So
I am going back to a point right now. I'm driving M6 Competition Edition, but I'm going to go back to Panamera Turbo with my next car.
Nice. All right.
So this car,
what is it about these cars that's so awesome?
So, well, except no substitution.
Mm-hmm.
This is all you really need in a car. I would say that what I like is I love sports luxury sedans, and there's not a lot of cars that can pull them off both well, right? Like the Beamer I'm driving now, I would say it's very heavy sport, but the luxury piece of it, not so much, right? It's got really good tech. I think Porsche does a really good job of balancing the two, so you feel like it's an elegant ride, but it also absolutely burns. This car does not. So this is actually one of the least collectible Porsches in the entire line. The 79 928 is known for just being just about garbage. To put its horsepower in perspective, and I'm not even going to talk about the relative weight of the vehicle compared to other vehicles. This vehicle is substantially slower than, say, a Honda Civic Si.
What?
Yeah, this is a slower car than that. So it's only pulling about, I want to say at the time, 280 horsepower at 4,500 RPM. And it's a very heavy car. So if you got a modern car, and not just the Honda Civic, any $30,000 to $35,000 range car today, just because of engine efficiencies and transmission tuning, is going to be way faster than this car. So the only reason they even sold this at auction because they called it risky.
So does that make the scene then more viable or not? The chase scene in Risky business where the guy's chasing him with T-Bird.
No, still no. That car, the car that's chasing him weighs 8.5 tons and has about 200 horsepower. There's no way, especially on an open, like in a closed street course, like they're running, there's no way that vehicle with its freaking rear wheel drive is going to be able to keep up with this freaking Porsche cutting through, and ultimately it loses them, but it shouldn't have been a contest even off the line.
Yeah, the Porsche is going to handle a lot better than that T-Bird that's chasing it. Now, the T-Bird does have an engine that's twice as big as the car that it's chasing, but there's not enough straightaway for it to catch.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not. It's going to be tuned completely different. So at short, fast acceleration, this car is going to do way better than the boat. And Jason knows he drove one.
Yeah.
Oh, you're talking about T-Birds?
Yeah.
Oh, he drove a T-Bird. I drove a Porsche. We'll get back together and we'll race them and see how it works out. For
Yeah,
him.
that'd be awesome. Please do so. Talking about
All
some
right.
serious homework there.
Albert, you're gonna have to go in the. Albert, get in the back seat. Jason, you can ride up front. We'll throw a wig on you. we'll do the whole scene.
Yeah, it'll be our own movie, like Flick Sync thing. We got to reenact that scene from Risky Business. Okay. Any final things? I want to get into the soundtrack just a little bit here, but any final thoughts on Risky Business? Jason, how does this rank for you? Is it a good movie? Do you enjoy watching this? Is it painful?
It's okay. I'll catch it when it's on TV. I think I have a copy on my media drive just because I probably got it in a bin someplace for $5 at Best Buy at one point. But it's not a movie that I go back to often. No, it's kind of ridiculous in its plot. It was great as a teenager. It's definitely geared towards, late teens, early 20s audience, but nowadays, there's other things to watch.
Yeah, we didn't mention what's his name, Joey Pantalonio or whatever his last name is. In terms of being in this movie as well, Joey
Pantalones. You said it like
yeah. The other just some other famous other parts real quickly that I really liked about this movie, and I'll turn it over to Will to kind of give us some closing thoughts here. But at the very end there, when at the very end of the movie where he says, "My name is Joel Goodson. I deal in human fulfillment. I gross over $8,000 in one night. Time of your life, huh, kid?" I thought that was a great moment because it calls back, and I never really understood watching it why they were showing those kids coming up from the entrepreneurs or whatever that little club was that they were doing. I did like the way that kind of tied in there. Originally, just the only kind of really trivia that I remember from this movie is originally the movie was going to be called White Boys Off the Lake. And when they pitched this idea, they wanted the name to be changed because it sounded too much like a musical. And then early on, which is a callback, because if you think about when Jackie shows up at his doorstep and he realizes Jackie's a man and he doesn't want anything to do with that, she mentions that, I'm going to give you a phone number to somebody. And he's like, it's somebody that you guys want. And she makes that comment about it's what all white boys off the lake want. And so that was where the line came from the movie, and it was eventually changed over into Risky Business. Okay, so Will, any kind of final thoughts here on the movie? Is this one that you enjoy, go back to every often?
I think it's nostalgic. I mean, I think if you're a Tom Cruise fan, or at least you used to be a Tom Cruise fan until he went crazy, like this is a cool transition in his career, right? Because he's going from Taps into Risky Business. They really didn't want him for the film because of his acting performance. They're like, what's this dude going to do? Yeah. Like this crazy militant guy's going to now play this, awkward teenager, but managed to pull it off. He made a lot of friendships in this movie. So or at least when he was making Taps. So Sean Penn was a really good friend of his at the time. Sean Penn makes a cameo in this movie, is actually in the Porsche scene. In fact, the line you quoted is where you'll see him in the film. So he'd come to the set all the time and hang out with Tom Cruise. Yeah. Great film. Let me put that back. It's a good film. It's not a great film. I'm with Jason. If it's on, I probably wouldn't change it, but I'm not going to go out and look for it.
Yeah. And it sits at like 92% on Rotten Tomatoes. Like with the critics, it sits pretty well. Like it's not dogged by any means. And I would say this is a movie that I probably don't go back to, but if it's on, I'll watch it. I think I appreciated it more ahead of this show in watching it than I have ever before. Like I was really noticing things and some of the symbolism, which we're not going to get into. I was starting to get into like theories and symbolism and some of the word choices and all that. And I was probably overthinking the movie and giving it way too much credit. But
no one on this channel overanalyzes anything, right? Just keep that in mind, Albert. These are all completely rational thoughts from normal people.
Yeah. I do want to talk about the soundtrack just quickly. Let me see. Here's the soundtrack. Old Rock and Roll by Bob Seger. There's a lot of Tangerine Dream, which I'm a huge fan of Tangerine Dream. You can guys give me crap all day long about that.
Oh,
Crowley
my God.
did. Crowley just raked me over the coals for liking Tangerine Dream.
Of course he did.
But of course he
what
would.
in the world? Albert, how long have I known you? Like what? Oh, we're
I don't
not
know.
supposed to tell people our names, but we've known each other way more than either of our wives have known us, and I've been married a long time. In my lifetime, the time that you and I have been together and listened to Tangerine Dream is exactly 0.
Yeah,
That must be like something like you hide in the closet, you put on your old Walkman, and you throw down some Tangerine Dream when nobody's around.
Well,
to
really defend you
it.
though, if it's not Metallica, Crowley doesn't like it.
That's very true. Like, there's very little that Crowley likes, period. But that is a very true statement. But did
that's
do
his shtick. That's his thing. I like it.
It's his thing. It is. This is the official soundtrack, but not. There's still like other songs that didn't make it on here. Every Breath You Take is playing while they're playing poker in the background. Didn't make it onto the official soundtrack, anyways. And I'll show you. There's one other one too. Muddy Waters, Jeff Beck, Prince, which I don't remember. Prince, I don't remember where that played. Might have been during the big prostitution ring thing they had going on that night, that day. After the Fall is Journey. I do have a slide for that one because I'm a big Journey fan. But the In the Air Tonight, I mean, this was huge for Phil Collins, and I don't recall when he left Genesis, but it wasn't far after this movie came out, at least when this song came out. So, I mean, this was right when he was peaking, and it is probably one of the things that stands out as a highlight for me, like, of the movie. And again, I'm going back to this where I said, music shouldn't be something you're looking forward to, but for this song resonates more with me than the movie did, especially when it came out. And I think it's just an amazing track. Agreed?
So I'm no Phil Collins expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I have a hard time distinguishing Phil Collins from Genesis because they sound the same.
Yeah, no, and it is true because
that is the best quote that's ever been on this podcast. That lead singer from Genesis. It sounds like he's copying that dude's style. He's got the vocal inflections down.
A lot of solo artists, whenever they leave, like Glenn Frey, when he left the Eagles, he did his own thing. It was very saxophone forward. And, Phil Collins, when he left Genesis, just continued being Phil Collins, just with a different band behind him.
So the reason why is because he was like the writer. He did all the music, the layout. I mean, there was nothing, like, he literally was the band. I hate to say that because I don't want to dog Genesis and the other members of the band, but Genesis was essentially Phil Collins. And so when he left, yeah, you're right, it is exactly pretty much the same thing. I mean, he got to experiment with more synth and instruments and stuff like that, and he took a backseat to playing the percussion, which is what he was doing with Genesis and the band. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it was literally him picking up his toys, going home and doing his own thing. But
and this was right after he left Genesis. I mean, it was shortly thereafter. In fact,
yeah,
a lot of the reason for him leaving Genesis has been attributed to the issues that he had at home and going through a terrible divorce after being married a while. And, this song is supposed to be about that process, not so much about the drowning kid that everybody, that urban legend everyone throws around, but really about the failure of his marriage and how he felt afterwards. So, really depressing foreshadowing for old Joel on the L train there. Don't fall in love with her, bro.
Not going to
end well.
Nope, never does. This is the cover for Journey Frontiers, which has After the Fall on it. So you're welcome. Okay, let's talk about war games. We're going to end on war games, and there's a lot to talk about here. So I know we're only at an hour and 18, but there's quite a bit. So war games. Let's see. Actually, you know what? Hold on. Let's talk about one other thing first. Sorry, I skipped over this one. These guys. You know who these guys are? Any wild guesses?
Are these the beepers?
Ding, ding, ding. These are the beepers.
Oh, my God. Albert, if you say this is one of your favorite bands.
I love the beepers.
You do not. No one liked the beepers. You know how I know no one liked the beepers? Because they disbanded after they didn't even make it a year. Terrible. You know what the beepers sounds like to me? It sounds like an 8-year-old who found a random soundboard on the internet while playing with a MIDI keyboard. It is.
It's
Look,
like in the 80s when you would go up to a synthesized keyboard and it had like pre-recorded tracks that you could just hit play and it would play them. And then you could just sit there and beep, beep, boop, 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 boop. That's pretty much what was coming out.
That's it. And then like a poorly made, unlicensed NES game playing in the background. That's all
their music sounds a lot like video game music from like the late 80s. So there's a video game composer called the Fat Man. He did several games. One of the notable games was, I think he did the Serious Sam series.
Oh,
wow. Those are great games.
And The Seventh Guest. He did the soundtrack.
Oh, that is one of my favorite
games. The 11th Hour.
He's
based out of Austin. And their music sounds a lot like his. His is real synthy. It's got that very synthy sound, but it's very video game forward. So when I heard their music, I was like, it kind of sounds like the Fat Man.
And Albert, I know, look, I love synth music, right? There's a lot of synth artists in the 80s that I like. This is just, nah, bro. I can't buy into anyone. I'm not saying there's not people, because I did some research and they've got a cult following. There are people that absolutely love this music, that thinks that, the soundtrack from War Games really bastardized a lot of the tracks that they had made by etching out the vocals. But not to me, sir. This is TRS 80.
So this one, so these guys, okay, no, so I like the beepers because of the music they did for the movie, but I mean, they never really did anything else. And so quickly, if you go look them up, like there's not even like a website, there's not like a wiki entry with really a lot of information. It's like they really kind of came and went. But if you look at individually and what they've contributed to movies, these guys have individually done a lot of stuff. Anthony Marinelli, who's the guy up here I'm showing the left-hand corner here, he's got the curly hair. This guy down here, I think this is him. This was where it got really sketchy in terms of, did I have the right picture or not? There seems like a huge...
Just random conductor.
I may have just picked a picture of a random conductor, but I think this is Arthur B. Rubenstein, who's done a lot of work in the movie industry. Brian Banks is this guy that kind of looks like that one guy from, he's one of the bad guys from Superman 2. What was his name? That's Zod. Dang it, I can't remember his name. All right. That's who I thought it was at first, but that's not him. And up here is Cynthia Morrow, who did the vocals. And so they really only contributed a couple of tracks here on the War Game soundtrack. They did Video Fever, which is what's playing when he's in the arcade, and we'll come to that scene and dig into that a little bit here in just a minute. They did History Lesson, which is it's not even a synth song. That's the one that's playing at the very end when they go to Falcon's Island, or the island Falcon's living on, and you can hear that harmonica, that piece. That's them doing that, which again doesn't really sound like that. But then they have another one.
Well, they're actually taking some of that arrangement from History Lesson. You see it throughout the movie. It's either slowed down, stripped out, but it's used as a part of the score composition throughout. So, they had that going for them. The one movie, like, you didn't even know it was a song. Like, if you listen to History Lesson in the film, I would not have assumed that was a song. I would have assumed it was a part of an abstract score that they were just using for ambient music. But that's a proper song. It's got lyrics and everything. They're terrible. Absolutely terrible. But, sorry, Cynthia. I'm sure that was the pinnacle of your career, and there's some random dude in his study slamming you for no reason.
Oh, she's fine. She actually went on to do some other stuff. Nothing really good, but she did. The talent was really Banks and Marinelli. So they were the ones that contributed to Young Guns, the 1988 film. I think Anthony Marinelli had also contributed to Thriller. He did some stuff there.
Yeah, so I did the research for the show, and I was like, they were on a couple of Michael Jackson tracks. They did some Africa Bambaataa, and like, what exactly were they doing? Like what did you contribute to Thriller? Like when we're talking about the Thriller album, were you just randomly hitting a cymbal in the background and you made it onto the album credits? Like, what were you doing?
I don't know.
Nothing on any of that album sounds like it came from these four yahoos. I mean, honestly, it would be more believable for you to tell me that these guys helped make the Dig Dug soundtrack and then they were on Thriller.
Let's see. Video Fever, History's Lesson. They did Murphy's Law. Did you ever see Blue Thunder, the 1983 film?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, and that is actually, so that's Rubenstein, who I think is the old guy that I just put a picture in. I'm pretty sure that's him though.
Yeah.
But he's the one that did the soundtrack for that one. And that soundtrack is awesome. Like I really like the non-vocal music that's in that.
It's no really Airwolf. Airwolf is superior in every way.
Oh, we'll have to have that debate Thunder at some point.
Oh no, there's no debate. The soundtrack's better. Hawk is better. The helicopter's better. There's no reason to vote Blue Thunder. We'll have this debate, but it'll be short.
There's can you guys see that right now? Did I put this up? Yeah. So never mind the mass and all this other garbage that's coming up here, but the lyrics, and we don't need to talk about this, but when you get a chance, go look up the lyrics for Video Fever. They're kind of they're a bit depressing, if I can say that.
Hey, I've got some advice for you people. Don't. Forget you ever heard of this band. Move on with your lives.
Or you could do that as well. Here's one last thing that I thought was interesting. Let me get rid of the Galaga thing because I didn't want to pop that up. But this is, you guys a fan of Crosby, Stills, and Nash?
Yeah. I mean,
so Crosby, Stills, and Nash actually did a song for the soundtrack, and it was called War Games.
Yep.
And it never made it to the soundtrack. I mean, if you go off this album here, Allies, you can go listen to it. It's the first track on it. And it's actually a really good song. Like, I'm not a huge Crosby, Stills, and Nash fan for no reason. And it's just I've never really sat down and dedicated a lot of time to listening to their full catalog. I'm sure if I did. Are you kidding
me?
No, I've never. But I listened to but I like the Beepers and Tangerine Dream.
I know. What is going on here? Like the bands that you said that you liked, but Crosby, Stills, and Nash, if you're putting these on some kind of scale, where is Hall of Fame Crosby, Stills, and Nash relative to the Beepers
or Tangerine
Dream?
I don't know. I have to look at that.
They're not on the same chart.
I know they're not. So anyways, these guys.
Albert has a very low floor.
I do. The bar is so low. The entry fees are very, very nominal. But yeah. Anyways, it was interesting, and I really did like this song. Like when I listened to it, and I wouldn't have known one that was Crosby, Stills, and Nash. I think what I read, and I didn't dive too much into this, but I read was. This is kind of a turning point for them. They were starting to introduce more synth and more instruments, kind of branch out a little bit. And this album wasn't particularly well received because of that, but it was, kudos to them for doing it. So,
but there was a lot of bands that were under pressure at this time. I mean, you remember early 80s. I got to think that the labels were pushing people to say, hey, we've got to turn this corner, that this classic Americana sound isn't working anymore, right? Yeah. People want pop. They want this. Hey, Jace, I got a question for you. Is there, can you think of a band that you liked, like pre-1980s, that tried to make that transition and failed miserably? Like just tried to go in that pandering to the masses direction and fell apart. It doesn't even have to be this era. Like anyone who's tried to make the transition.
Over to a synthier sound from, oh, man. Yeah.
Or just try to reinvent themselves.
Yeah.
I know there's a couple bands out there and it'll come to mind as soon as I'm not thinking about it, but yeah, not off the top of my head at this point. You put the pressure on and I'm totally crumbling.
I'm going to go with Garth Brooks.
Oh, the Chris Gaines era?
Chris Gaines era. Although that album,
there's no bad Garth Brooks album, sir.
That album, well, and he was slaughtered when that thing came out, right or wrong. And I remember listening to it at the time. I didn't really care for it. I didn't hate it like everybody else did. I've listened to it now that I'm older, and I actually enjoy that album. And I'm not afraid to say that. Of course, I'm not afraid to say I like Tangerine Dream either, so I didn't say a whole lot.
That's right.
But yeah, that's one that comes to mind forefront is like what was going on there and how much flack he took for doing it.
The only song I hate by Garth Brooks is Friends in Low Places, because if you go karaoke, which I love to do, you're going to hear it at least twice from a group of drunken people. And it's going to sound terrible.
You can't blame the song because people love to sing it.
I did it to Black Velvet. I'm not listening to that either. I listen to the same thing with Sheryl Crow and Kid Rock Picture. I'm not going to hear two drunk people in Quasi Love sing that duet one more time.
So I think maybe Jefferson Airplane into Jefferson Starship.
Oh my goodness, yes. That was a
disaster.
big departure from what they were doing at the time. Although I do like Starship.
Yeah, what about the Mannequin soundtrack?
Yeah, we built this city.
Outstanding. Say you don't. I don't know how much I could sing before they.
Out of that movie, the soundtrack is not what I remember.
From Mannequin?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I for some reason, and not to get off on a tangent here, but my memory, like the lines between Mannequin and Today's Special are completely blurred for me. Do you remember Today's Special?
No.
It was the PBS show that came on, and it had the mannequin and the girl, and the mannequin would come to life at nighttime, and then they had Muffy, who was the little puppet mouse, and then they had the old
up until the puppet mouse, that was Mannequin.
Yeah,
right, that's exactly right. And then they had the old. Okay, we're gonna pull this up because I can't believe you guys are not top. Today's Special. Let's see here.
It was a show?
Thing. Yes, and this is the old guy here. If you can see. So, I mean, this show doesn't ring a bell to you? He was the mannequin.
No.
He was the mannequin. She was the person that worked at the store.
So I don't remember this, but for some reason, I can hear the theme song. Like, I know exactly. Today's Special. Yeah,
sing it loud and clear. And then so it was in a department store, and at nighttime they would turn on Sam the Security.
I do remember it. It's now that I see the hobo guy.
That's not a hobo. That's the security guard. He would come on. He'd be like, "Hey, Muffy, what are you doing, Muffy?" That's how he would talk.
You've been awarded 100 points and 100 bonus points for doing the inflection.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't know if it was on PBS or Nickelodeon.
But he had to be a drunk. Only drunks had the red nose back then. Like if you painted someone's nose red like that, it meant they were a lush. And for someone who drinks, I've never had that happen.
And there was the way they would turn the mannequin to life. I forget I think it was Muffy, the rat or the mouse, sorry, whatever it is, would come out and say hocus pocus alamagokus.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, there's stuff getting unwrapped within my some deep access memory getting.
Will's gonna need a therapy session after this.
Why did you forget this? What happened? What did Sam the security guard do to you?
Show us on the doll where he
show us on the doll.
Wow. So yeah, war game or bleepers.
Yeah, this was not in the show notes.
It was not in the show notes. Yeah.
Oh, look at Juan brings up Danger Mouse. Now there's a show.
We're gonna get the Danger Mouse. No, we're not. All right, stop it, Juan. We're not doing Danger Mouse.
Say info. We're not going to do Danger Mouse. All right, there, Governor.
Go, Governor. Okay, that's enough. Let's talk about war games.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Let's see. Let me pull up the reference here because, I don't know. There's a whole lot of references, honestly, in this chapter. He says, the one I have here, it says, "Then I knew where I was and who I was. I was David Lightman, Matthew Broderick's character in the movie War Games. And this was the first scene in the film. I was in the movie." So, and this is, that we've talked about the flick sync and what he's got to go through in order to get points and get through the gate and be awarded the next key here. But quickly, so War Games was directed by John Badlam. It stars Ferris Bueller, the guy from Cloak and Dagger, Professor Falcon, and awkwardly, one of my ex-girlfriends, Ali Sheedy. Other notable performances in this movie were also Barry Corbin as General Behringer, which we got to talk about because, my goodness, that guy is he steals the show half the time for me. Eddie Dizon, that's Eugene from Grease. He was in this as well. He played a character named Malvin.
Mr. Potato Head.
Mr. Potato Head. Mr. Potato Head. Back doors are not tricks. Okay. Jason Bernard as Captain Newt. Now, Jason Bernard, I don't have a picture of him. I was going to pull one up, and I didn't get around to it. But the only thing I know him for, did y'all ever play the Wing Commander series, like Wing Commander 4, Wing Commander 5?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so he was in, that's where I know him from. Before I knew he was in War Games, honestly. It wasn't until later that I went, oh, hey, look, that's the dude from Wing Commander. It also has Michael Madsen, Mr. Blonde, in it, and John Spencer, who plays FBI Director James Womack from The Rock, which we talked about a couple episodes ago. That's a 1996 film starring Sean Connery, James Bond, and that other guy that's in everything.
Nicolas Cage.
Nick Cage. It's got James Tolkien as Wigan, who's one of the FBI guys, but we all know him as Top Gun Stinger. I think I got a picture of him here I can throw up. I don't know why it's off center either, but that's Wiggin there.
I'm giving you a dream shot.
And there's Mr. Blonde right there. There's the other guy.
That is not the protocol, sir. Turn your keys, sir.
Turn your keys, sir. We're going to talk about that scene too, because there's a good story behind that one. And then the other one that it had, and I'm still in these slides. I shouldn't do that. I'll come back to those. We'll come back to them. The other, it's also got Judge Reinhold, who has a small cameo in here on top of that. So let's see. I don't have the synopsis from Internet Movie Database. It's about a kid has a computer, hacks into NORAD or whatever, and launches. Almost starts World War III. There you go. That's the premise of the. Or here, a young man finds a backdoor into a military central computer in which reality is confused with game playing, possibly starting World War III. The other, I guess, Will, let's start with you. War Games is a movie that a lot of people say influenced them in a lot of different ways. Are you in that camp as well?
Absolutely. I would say to this day, I'm a huge War Games fan. It's one of my favorite films. And I do believe it is the most accurate representation of era-specific and hacking, although the word hack never appears in this movie. Mm-hmm. Although it is the first time the use of the word firewall is used in film and is used properly. So this, I think, is not a science fiction film. This is a science fact film. And I'm sure as we go through this for the next, 15, 20 minutes, that's going to be clearly established. And anyone who would like to change my mind, I dare you. Let's go.
Bring it on. Jason, War Games, is this worthy of smoking and drinking in space? Is it on the list?
Yes.
Have you done this one?
No, we have not done War Games.
Okay,
yet.
Well, there's another one.
But I think it's worthy of the list just because of the artificial intelligence involved.
Yeah.
That controls the missiles. That was far and away beyond the technology of the time.
Yeah.
So for the level of sophistication the AI did, but for the idea that war game simulations were occurring in the early 80s,
sure.
SRI, who was known as a game company, and I'm sure you're familiar with them,
mm-hmm.
Albert, I think they might even be referenced in Ready Player One, were at the time developing these exact types of war games for the military.
You talking about SSI, Strategic Simulations Incorporated?
SRI.
SRI, huh. I don't think they're referenced in the novel. No, but go on, sorry.
Yeah, so how about you, Albert? What vivid memories of this?
Oh, dude,
this make you want to be a computer guy growing up?
Oh, absolutely.
Or just
nope. This was the movie that when I saw it I needed to have a computer, and I didn't know what kind I was going to get. I didn't know anything about it. It led to a span of about maybe 5 or 6 years up until about 87, where a friend of mine, I think, and he still listens to the show. His name's Jeff Munoz. So hi, Jeff. He's the one that introduced me, and I think I've mentioned him before on the show a few times, but he really had a big impact on my life. And he had a computer. He was into Dungeons and Dragons and role playing and all that stuff. So when I met him, I was over at his house all the time just to get onto bulletin board systems and download games. And I felt like we were doing the things that we were seeing here. Now, we weren't hacking per se, but we were definitely on BBSs and trying brute password attempts to get into BBSs so that we could get games and download those onto a C64 and all that. So, I mean, we would stay up way into the crack of dawn doing this kind of stuff, not knowing what we were doing. And it's kind of like we talked about on the last show with Neil. Like, at the time, there wasn't a whole lot out there. I mean, there was only so much that you could know. And a lot of times you were just trying whatever, and word was getting passed around either on bulletin board systems, if you can get into those, or, through magazines like Byte and some of the other there's another computer magazine, which I have a picture of that we'll talk about here in a few minutes, but that was really your only source outside of just talking to people in general. There was no internet. There wasn't anything like publicized or outside of those two magazines. This is all a black box for a lot of people at the time. So it certainly sparked a lot of interest for a lot of different people. And you look at people today that are in cryptology or cryptozoology and all that stuff, that security, they all credit this movie as being one of those things that really launched their careers and influenced them in a way that it's kind of like when those people that you hear about, I saw the first person land on the moon, and suddenly I wanted to go into space and I wanted to be a scientist of some sort. This movie kind of did the same thing for people in the IT industry and a lot of different areas of the IT industry as well.
Right. I do think what gets lost on this film, and I'd really get Jason's perspective on this too, is there are films that we watch for entertainment value, like the ones that we talked about, and before, Risky Business and Ferris Bueller's Day Off. But this, when you watch this film, it's really important that you have historical context as to where we were geopolitically at the time, because if you don't truly understand this, this comes off as a lighthearted, scampy kid who's breaking into computers and, oh, there's a risk of war. But this was a real thing in this era, right? We were at the height of the Cold War. Reagan that year had called Russia the evil empire. We were, a lot of kids in school were still doing nuclear drills where they went under their desk. This is the same year that The Day After came out, and it turned into this big, national event where we talked about, de-arming our, trying to find an end to the Cold War. If you can't watch this movie through this lens, you might not get, the social message that this film is really trying to send.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, we were at the height of the Cold War. Everybody was expecting nuclear Armageddon at any moment, and the things that shaped this film and other films like it was that exact Cold War scenario. It was a lot of thought projects or experiments of what if this happened, and this is one of those films where what if an artificial intelligence were in charge of the bombs and it went haywire and decided to just launch? What would happen? Well, that would be the end of humanity, probably.
Yeah.
So, Albert, I do have a question for you. So you talked about how this movie you were trying to do the same things that you saw in this film. So I thought, like, when I say this is a realistic hacking movie, like the concept of being a phone freak or war dialing, these were all real things that people were doing at the time. I mean, these weren't incredibly sophisticated, but media after this decided that that's not how they were going to portray any type of hacking, that it wasn't going to be this methodological process that took forever and was really boring to watch. We've since this time seen some incredibly insane attempts of depicting hacks in media. What is the worst, Albert? Who's the worst offender?
Pick any one of the CSI whatever shows.
Yes.
They are, I mean, all like, what's the other one? There's another one too that my wife watches, and I can't even watch. What's the one that has, she's like she's like a female, and she's like got the headset on, and she's the one trying to hack in this. I don't, maybe.
Well,
she's really eclectic dressed and all that, but whatever it is, she does.
I thought that was CSI, like the dual keyboard where both of them are. I'm gonna need some help. And so she jumps on the keyboard, and they're both on the keyboard. That's the most insane thing I've ever seen.
I know.
It's like the dumbest thing ever.
I'm rerouting traffic now. Just give me a second, and they hit enter, and boom, it happens.
It's just words. I'm gonna need your Ethernet in the firewall in order to get to the database. Roger, I'm on it.
So one of my guilty pleasures, and it is
here it is, CSI.
Absolutely. Totally inaccurate. Well, I mean, mostly inaccurate. They do have some accuracies in it, but the movie Hackers, that is definitely one of my guilty pleasures, but it is so not how actual, cracking and hacking are portrayed.
Yeah.
Although Mr. Robot does a pretty good job of fictionalizing real world scenarios in terms of cybersecurity.
So I heard that they do
the first season. So I was a big Mr. Robot fan the first season, because I didn't think in that show they cheapened the IT experience. They were doing things and talking like you would if you worked in cybersecurity. You were using the right phrasing. I mean, it wasn't dumbed down, but it seemed to me that as that show gained traction, they started dumbing that down a little bit, so that in the latter episodes of the later seasons, you weren't seeing the scenario might be a little more realistic, but the way they went about it was they just made it digestible, because at that point chimpanzees were watching the show, and the great unwashed were watching.
Well, and the plot points were getting a little more ridiculous at that time too. So.
Well, let me get back to my little slides here. We talked about these guys, talked about this guy. We haven't talked about this guy. So I've got 3 pictures up here right now, and this is Eddie here. I've got a picture from him in Greece. One from the Polar Express, where he played an animated character, and this is from 1941. Have you guys seen all three of these movies?
Yes. I
Okay.
don't remember him from 1941 at all.
That's him. He's on the Ferris wheel, like at the very end. You know, when the Ferris wheel is going around and the Japanese start shooting it down, then it comes off the hinges and he's going.
Yeah.
That's him.
I didn't realize that was him.
I cropped him out from the other guy who I forget now who plays that role. But yeah, these are so. I guess. Well, what's his best role? Like, he is a true character actor. Plays the nerd in everything he's ever done. I don't know that anyone's ever passed a script in front of him that had him do anything outside of that. But what's his best role?
This is it. War Games is his best role to me.
Really?
I mean, because I think really think of who they had characterized as IT guys before this movie came out. There wasn't a whole lot of them.
Yeah.
I really believe these two characters formed the identity of what the average person thought that computer people fell into.
Yeah.
You had fat sloppy guy, and then you had total nerd disconnect guy who had no social skills at all. This is his best role by far, but he's a great actor. I love him in everything. He should be in more stuff.
Yeah, Eddie Dizon. He's great. Let's talk about this guy though too, because there's a lot to be said about. So this is a picture of Barry Corbin from, like, he's got a website, like a fan website, like the Barry Corbin fan page, and they've done these mock-up pictures like this. And I'm not knocking the page because, I mean, trust me, I like some weird stuff as well, like good weird stuff though, safe weird stuff. But so they've doctored up this picture here. I don't know. I don't even know where to begin with this guy. He's got some of the greatest lines, I think, in the movie. At one point, he sounds like he's supposed to be from Texas, maybe, or from the South. He's got an accent. At one point, he's chewing red tobacco. He pulls out the red man pouch.
Pulls out the red. Flush the bombers. Get the subs ready.
Tell
him we're going to DEFCON 1.
Oh, my goodness. We got to talk about DEFCON 2 as well. There was somebody who was mentioning that and maybe, Will, you can speak to this given your past history, but what I read was his Air Force uniform is a uniform that was worn,
stock. Yeah, it's a stock uniform.
Yeah, like this is something that would have been worn in the 50s, and so he's got World War II medals on there. And
he has no medals past 1949. Just about everything was World War II, which meant that for some reason, General Behringer never served in the Vietnam conflict.
Right, that he says he did,
which would be ridiculous. But hey, so you say he had a Texas accent. This character, in fact, most of the characters in this movie are based on real people.
Yeah.
So General James Hattinger, who was the commander-in-chief of NORAD at the time, right before this film was made, is this character. He is the same guy if you've ever seen him talk. He famously said, machines are taking over the military, and not in a good way. He was absolutely opposed to the use of technology to make decisions in warfare. And interestingly, the Department of Defense struggles with that even today, because we have finally got to a point in technological advancement that we can wage an at-scale conflict without ever putting a human life at risk. So if you look at where we were when this movie was made, 100% of our fighter aircraft, bomber aircraft, they were all manned aircraft. Now, 2/3 of our fighting aircraft are drones, are all remotely piloted.
Yeah.
Right. So it's interesting that in this movie, he probably plays the most picture perfect role. But the general, the guy who served as the commander in chief of NORAD at the time,
James Hardinger was his name.
Yeah. General James Hardinger. He was he worked as a consultant and actually talked to the writer and the director before the film was made.
Yeah, and I picked that up too. I also read that some of his character was based on one of the writers' father. I think it was, or Badlam's father, the director's father or something. Yeah, there's some inspiration there as well.
Badlam's a heck of a director. I mean, he did Saturday Night Fever.
Oh yeah, that's a great movie. I don't know what you're talking about. That's an awesome movie. Taught me how to dance at a very young age. Here's Judge Reinhold, and this movie came out after like Risky Business, so I don't know if this was like film prior to, but I thought, or not Risk. Sorry, it was after Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Excuse me, Fast Times.
Are you
at Ridgemont
serious? I've recently seen this. That's not Judge Reinhold.
It is Judge Reinhold. Trust me.
I'll bet a drink on it. I don't think that's him.
You go ahead and take that drink now because it's really him.
he must have had a rough go of it after
That's what I'm.
Fast Times.
That's what I'm saying. Like at Fast Times, like he's kind of a standout character. I mean, he comes back a little bit later. He gets his career going. Don't get me wrong, but and so I was trying to think about this. Like, so was it because he didn't really have a lot of roles and he was just kind of taking anything even after Fast Times at Ridgemont High, or was it one of these things where sometimes they'll take a couple movies. Oh, it's only 2 scenes. Sure, I got that. It gets filmed and then it just sits in production hell for a number of years and finally it gets released. And by that time, the actor's gone on and done bigger and better things. I don't know. I didn't really get into all that, but that is certainly Judge Reinhold there who has that single. He has like 2 or 3 lines in there.
Well, his hair is completely out of regulation.
Well, he's in the Army, so right? Or is he in the Air Force? Is that an Air Force?
He's got Air Force rank on.
Oh, yeah, he does. All right.
Yeah, but why he's wearing his hat indoors is beyond me. That was never a thing. That dude should not have his hat on. His uniform looks like garbage. It looks like a duffel bag, and his hair's a mess. But so is the security guy that they have there.
Oh, I didn't get a picture of him, but yeah.
Oh, you should have. That's the greatest offense in the movie and the career field that I was in. So that beret, bro, go fix yourself.
Is that another thing? You can't wear that beret when you're in security?
So the security guys, depending on who they are, if you look at the uniform he's wearing, it's almost like the director drove by the main gate of a base and said, "Oh, that's what a cop looks like."
Right there.
That guy at the gate. But typically the guys at the gate are what we call like honor guard guys. So they are wearing like an ascot and they have their, pants bloused over core frame boots with white laces and wearing white gloves to wave in traffic for high visibility. But you'll never see any other security guy wearing white gloves around. That dude wears them the whole film.
The whole film. Yeah, he does.
That dude.
No prints.
Even the mustache is out of regs. Fix that guy. That guy would have.
All right, let's move on. Okay, so here I've got a couple different scenes. I mean, this is the scene earlier I talked about. You can see Dig Dug here on the left-hand side. You can see he's playing Galaga. There's Zaxxon. I can't really make out some of the other games. There's Tron. I can see that one. But this is the arcade that's happening. And again, people are ordering like fries and Cokes. And here's where there's something I want to throw up real quick. So I'm showing a picture now of the scene where it's, again, early on, they're in the arcade, and there's a kid that, this lady right here that I'm showing says something like, "Here's your fries and Coke," is what she says. And if you look behind her, the time on the clock says it's 8:23, which makes sense. I would have figured it's probably about 8:23. He's running late for school. But there's a lot of kids in this arcade at 8:23. So they're all late, and I don't understand why they're that early. That's obviously not realistic. But then the line from the book, though, in the novel Ready Player One, it says, "Now I heard a repetitive electric beeping. It seemed to be coming from the right pocket of my jeans that I was wearing. Keeping my left hand on the joystick, I reached in my pocket and pulled out a digital watch. The readout said 7:45 a.m. When I pushed one of the buttons to silence the alarm, a warning flashed in the center of my screen display. David, you're going to be late for school." So I don't know if this is a thing where there was just, Ernie Klein decided to go with 7:45 because he's figuring most kids would probably go into school about that time. But it doesn't line up with the clock that's on the back. Now, you could say that the clock is broken and it always says 8:23. But I don't know. It kind of bothered me. I don't know why. Maybe it does to this day.
It shouldn't bother you, and if it does, you should talk to a therapist. That's an odd thing to be bothered by. But to your point, I actually support the clock didn't work because, I mean, back then, clocks on walls were not reliable.
Nothing was reliable in the early 80s. I'm just
more impressed with the watch telling him that he was going to be late for school.
Yeah. Well, and that's part of the Oasis, right? It's kind of it was telling him that he needed to get on with the flick sync there. Here's him playing Galaga. He taps out right before the last challenge. And interesting enough, and I could not find, and maybe I don't know if you guys looked into this at all, but this was a Bally Midway promotional that they did with the movie War Games. And this was, so what you see here on the left-hand side was the promo banner that went above the arcade games. On the right-hand side, this is a Galaga game, but that is not the original, right? This is a redone, refurbished Galaga game, and this is a redone banner that someone was selling online so that if you had this and you wanted to make it look like it was one of the Galaga machines from like 1982, you could buy this banner. So it was a reproduction banner, if you will. But I could not find any information at all on what the sweepstakes was. It says, see the movie in Inter-Bally Family Entertainment Centers War Games Hollywood Sweepstakes. I guess the simple explanation is at some point, as part of the cross promotion with Galaga for this movie, if you won the sweepstakes, you flew out to Hollywood, you got to see the movie, I think maybe, or you got a tour of Hollywood. I don't know. But they did do something here. And not only was he playing this game here, but later on, and I've got a picture of it later on, when we get the, welcome distinguished visitors to Birmingham, or whatever it was, that thing that comes up on the display, that you can hear the challenge sound, the challenge stage sequence play at that moment as well. So there was 2 parts in this movie that they did this whole little Galaga cross promotion thing. All right, Protovision. This is interesting. So this company did not exist. It was one. So this is in the scene where he's got the magazine and he's looking at the ad for Protovision, and this turns into where he goes to look for the software. But there's a couple things about this. Number one, the company name is completely made up. That name, that domain, still exists today though, and it's actually been picked up by somebody. They do like these homebrew Commodore 64 games, and if you go out to their website, you can download these games. They have merchandise with this logo all over it as well. So Protovision is a real thing now, though it was not back in 1982. I tried to look at the address that was listed there, the 2407 Rogers Boulevard, Sunnyvale, California, 95051. One, the zip code's not right, and that may be because it was wrong. Either it was wrong at the time, or it's changed. The zip code has changed since then. But the address of 2407 Rogers Boulevard doesn't exist. I was hoping I'd find that, and it was just completely made up and random. There's no address like that in Sunnyvale. But more importantly, here's the magazine. Like, someone actually went out and took stills of the magazine that he's got and he's holding, and it's only shown for a brief second. You can only see the cover of it for a brief second, and I'll come back to that here. But this is the actual magazine that he's holding in his hands. It's called Creative Computing, and this is one of the 2 magazines. There was Byte Magazine and Creative Computing that were out at the time. September of 1982, Volume 8, Number 9. It was $2.95. And the page that I had here, this is the actual page that we see in the movie that has the phony ad that they stuck in for the Protovision, which is really cool. And you can actually download this whole magazine. I was spending way too much time looking through this magazine at some of the stuff. It's hilarious, like some of the stuff they're talking about. Okay, Jason, I'm going to get to you on this next one here. So this is a scene that for whatever reason, like they hold on the scene for way too long, and I had to dive into it because I wanted to know about it. But did this strike you as odd that they had to show Dad holding the raw corn on the cob, which doesn't look raw? Maybe it is.
This corn is raw.
Yeah.
He's got it, and he's trying to put the butter on it, but I don't know. Does this scene do anything for you?
When you look at it, Jason, when you see a corn cob, what's that do for you?
Well, I'm not James, so it doesn't really do much for me. But yeah, this is odd. I'd never seen anybody butter their corn with a buttered slice of bread before. That was totally new to me. I mean, it seems kind of ingenious rather than trying to spread butter with like a butter knife all over your corn, or do what I do and just use the stick of butter. But
that's interesting. So I didn't know that wasn't the way that everybody buttered.
Oh,
seriously. No, seriously. And growing up, that is how we buttered corn. You're gonna have to take a survey.
Y'all were big War Games fans, I guess. Huh?
No, that's just how you did it.
So the story is, and I don't have the complete story here, but apparently one of the writers, this is somebody he knew, and this guy was like somebody in the military. They think he was like an ex-Nazi at one point. And this stood out for him when he saw this as a kid, or remember he had some memory of this person that used to butter their corn this way, and they had to write it in there at some point. So this
is how ex-Nazis butter their corn?
I guess, yeah. Let's just go with that.
Craziest connection.
I don't know what's going on in this picture, like this scene here. He's got no shirt on. I thought that was odd. I mean,
the glamour shot. This
is the glamour shot. But yeah, I don't know. All right, that's all I had there. Okay, let's talk about the computer. I really wanted this computer growing up for the longest time, and I think if you go out there today, you can find all the pieces. Like the website, I think it's imsci.net or .com is still out there. You can go to the website. You can buy. They've got ways that you can go procure all of the equipment that you want. But the total thing, I've got everything up on the screen right now, but what Matthew Broderick was using in this in the movie was a CompuPro System 816 computer. He had an MSI FDC-2 dual 8-inch floppy, not a 5 1/4, but a freaking 8-inch, which I had never. When I saw this movie, I was like, okay. And then all the ones I had were 5 1/4, but they weren't as big. And I never, to this day, have never actually held or seen a full size 8-inch floppy disk. Nope, not in a computer. Now they were used in like military businesses had them, but for like home microcomputers, a lot of them went with the 5 1/4 because the 8-inch floppies were just too expensive to produce, and so they were trying to reduce the costs. But I've never seen an 8-inch floppy disk to this day.
I've seen 2 actual floppies. I've never seen the drive
for the 8-inch.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I used to work for an energy research institute when I was in college as a student worker, and used to basically correct data in Fox Pro. It was an awful job, but it gave me some money.
Yeah.
And they had a lot of really, really old computing assets, one of which they were still using to collect data that I had to pull data from. But yeah, often the storage area were some 8-inch floppies.
Wow. Yeah, I marvel at those things. They're so huge. The keyboard here is an MSI 1KB. It's called, the I stands for Intelligent Keyboard 1. The monitor is an Electro-Home 17-inch monitor. That's an MSI Cerametric 212A modem, and then they had the acoustic coupler, which is what we see down on the right-hand side, which I also read it wasn't necessary. Like with the MSI, it had like a modem card you could buy, so that was the preferred method. But for the sake of the visual effect, they wanted to put a coupler into the movie itself. And we won't get into the specs, but I mean, they're pretty hilarious. This computer looks awesome. Like I really want to go try to find one and buy one just to kind of have it in the house. And I should mention, this computer does come up again, literally in chapter 38, which is like the second to the last chapter. It's mentioned there, and I think it twice actually. But I don't want to steal the thunder. So we're going to come back and talk about this computer in a lot more detail sometime in the next 5 years. Okay. That was a joke. All right. So this is the Shall We Play a Game? This is obviously where we get our titles for the episode. There's Behringer pulling out some tobacco for his Red Man stuff. But I want to get into this stuff here. So there's the hacks that were going on in here. And there was John Draper was a consultant for this film. He's the Captain Crunch guy. And we're going to talk about that here in a few more chapters as well with the Captain Crunch whistle. Thanks to this novel. And then Scott Lewis was the inspiration for David Lightman. And Scott Lewis is another kind of infamous hacker early at the time. And there's a whole lot of stuff on him. But I really tried to look into the viability of whether this was possible. And from what I saw, what I read was you could have technically done this. This was no different than a coupler that was listening in on the audio signals and translating those into electronic signals. That if this was indeed how the keypad was set up, that with the equipment, now whether or not the scissors or whatever he's got there, doing some kind of bypass. What is that?
Yeah, so that would technically work. So if you're looking at this and this is a purely analog system, it depends on actually the front side of the reader, right? So as you know, Albert, I specialize in IT-based physical security systems, right? So I was either going to do that or be part of a really cool bank robbery crew. But this will work, but only if the keypad on the front used tones. So if it had unique tones, then it would work, but otherwise it wouldn't. And yeah, you could actually use those scissors in order to get past the jacket, actually hit the conductor in order to get the reverberations of the phone. It wouldn't sound like that when he recorded it, but it would still theoretically work. But you would need each button to have a unique tone. And typically in security applications, even in the 80s, they didn't do that for that reason.
Yeah. Jason, have you ever hacked anything in your life?
I'm not going to answer that question directly, but yeah. So back in the old and stupid days, some friends and I, we used to do some crazy thought experiments, of course, but like they used to have those electronic cards. I guess it was probably 92, 93, whenever they became popular, where you could record your voice and, give somebody a greeting card that gave a personal message whenever they opened it. Those same cards you could also hook up to the sound card on your computer and record quarter tones for payphones. You record 7 or 8 of those computer tones, and then you pick up a payphone, put that up to the card, open the card, and it gave you like $2 worth of change in the in the payphone.
I didn't know about that. Yeah.
Again, total thought experiment. Not sure if that worked or not. But yeah, we used to have thought experiments like that.
Yeah.
Fueled by magazines such as like 2600 and a few others. Yeah.
Good old hacker stuff. There, I want to talk about the other hackers, but quickly, here's the WOPR, War Operational Plan Response. I need a shirt. I started working on a shirt logo for this, like creating it, and never finished it. But maybe someday I'll get around to that because I wasn't able to find one out there available that anybody's made yet. But I would rock a WOPR shirt.
You know why they called it the WOPR?
Why?
Well, because NORAD's mainframe computer was Burger, but they couldn't use the BRGR, so they renamed it WOPR. Yeah.
That's great. That we should just end the show on that right now. Here's the telephone thing, and this is the one that I guarantee you, man, I tried this I don't know how many times as a kid, and after, I don't know if it was because of this movie, but they started gluing that piece on payphones, so it became more increasingly difficult. And I remember being able to unscrew those at one point because when this movie came out, I was out there trying to do what he did and never got it working. And it seemed like as the months and years went by, those things started getting locked down and glued, and I couldn't do it anymore. So, but this is, again, the stuff that we were seeing in this movie was just so like, we'd never seen anything like this before, and it was a whole new concept, new technology, and really kind of just sparked a lot of people's interest and curiosity. This is the most ridiculous scene in the world. Like this guy that when they're coming into the base, and he just like plows right through that gate and nearly kills everybody, including himself. I always thought was hilarious. And
that scene right there was when they filmed that. That's not what was supposed to happen. They were actually supposed to crash through the gate and get into the tunnel, but that happened, and they kept it in the film.
Oh, really?
Yep.
That's even better. Here's Professor Falcon. Looking, he's pointing and saying this is ridiculous. There's no way this could happen. We got a great. So
Professor Falcon was built off of Stephen Hawking. Yep. And they actually offered him the role, but he didn't want to take it because he was afraid that they were going to exploit his disability. So who'd they line up after that, Albert? Who knows?
John Lennon.
That's right. Then something happened to him, so he couldn't make the film.
Oh, too soon. Yeah, that was the weirdest thing. Like that John Lennon would have. He already had said yes, I thought, or at least he had said he was interested in coming on and playing this role of Dr. Falcon.
I can't see John Lennon in that role.
I can't
really.
I think no.
Yeah, I would have liked it. I think he's got the right vibe for it.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was an interesting casting choice for sure. And there's a whole story like why they picked him of all people, right? You think about it, like how did they go after John Lennon? But yeah, he was. There's a whole story there we can't talk about now. Here's the tic-tac-toe scene, right? That's pretty iconic. All these screens are iconic. I think this is the one I'm using in my background as well. And then we finally get the very end of the movie here, where the whole idea is that the only way to win the game is not to play. And before we get the final credit scene, there's Will, do you have any other trivia that you want to throw at us here from this movie? And I've got some still as well, but we probably have the same notes here.
Yeah, I think on the military side, all DEFCONs, it's a real thing. So
yeah, what is going on with DEFCONs?
So defensive conditions,
but yes, still used today?
Yes, to some degree they are. So
okay.
First, the misconception is this isn't really NORAD, as we've talked about before the show. This is Cheyenne Mountain, which isn't far from NORAD, but it's the alternate location in the event of a nuclear war. It's not just, and never has been a strictly U.S. facility. It is both a U.S. and Canadian monitoring and surveillance facility. It has been since inception. So at no time, even though, General Behringer's calling for DEFCON 2 and DEFCON 1, that is not how that works in the real world. Never has been.
DEFCON 2, they don't say that?
Only, I would imagine he may, but the only person that can declare a change in DEFCON is the president with consultation from the Joint Chiefs. So NORAD being an intelligence and surveillance center, they're not actually doing tactical planning like They're not saying flush the bombers, and they're not doing
Scramble
any of
the
that.
jets.
Yeah. Back then, it would have been Strategic and Tactical Air Command. Today, it's U.S. Strategic Command that would do that work. But it made for a good movie.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see, Jason. I guess where does this movie fit with you? Like overall, I mean, did this spark anything for you? Did it change your life in any way as a kid?
Well, it didn't change my life. I mean, I was already, interested in electronics and computers and games by the time I saw this movie, which I didn't see this movie again in theaters. I saw it probably a year or two after it released on home video. But yeah, this is a movie that I still go back to. It's a fun movie. It definitely hits all the nostalgia buttons from the Cold War, the feeling of the Cold War
Yep.
to, old school hacking and, teen adventure movies. So it pushes all the right buttons. It's a fun movie. It's one that I keep coming back to.
Yeah.
And it was incredibly influential. Also, this film actually started our first cybersecurity piece. So Ronald Reagan got a private screening. I'm sure in your trivia you might have seen that Ronald Reagan got a private screening of this film. The screenwriter was family friends with Ronald Reagan because he was in acting back in the day, right? So he got a screening of the film, saw it, and then called a emergency session of the Joint Chiefs the next day saying, "Is this possible?"
Yeah.
He's like, "Not only is it possible,
It's already happened.
but we're doing it, and we've been doing it for the better part of a decade," which led to a lot of the first iteration of cybersecurity laws, anti-hacking laws. All of those came, and in fact, when they passed the first set of cybersecurity regulations in Congress, they showed excerpts from this film so that the congressman would understand what they were talking about.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, it's a good point of reference. And the one thing the other trivia that I have, the opening scene, I said we were going to come back to that, and I kind of skipped over, but I do want to mention it. So the opening scene where the two guys are, think World War III is about to start and all that, it actually had happened twice before. So it happened in 1979, it happened in 1980. I found a great CBS, what was it, 60 Minutes, I think, did a piece in like 1980 or 81 or something, right after the second event happened. And you can find it on YouTube, but it's really interesting. But in 79, they almost went to World War III because someone left a simulation tape in one of the systems. And then the more important, more shocking one was in 1980, where there was a faulty chip in the NORAD headquarters computer. And that actually caused them to scramble jets. They were ready to go. They were about ready to shut down all the flights when they realized that the chip was faulty.
But did not change the DEFCON, sir. So we've only actually gone as far as DEFCON 2, and that was 1962 for the Cuban Missile Crisis. In fact, even 9/11 didn't merit greater than a DEFCON 3. So sorry.
Yeah, no, you're right. That's a good point. We didn't go. The DEFCONs didn't change. In the 1980 event, I think they were just about ready to call the president of the United States, and it was literally moments before he was about to make the call and say, "We're at war. We need to do something." Someone said, "Hold on, hold the phone. It's not really happening." So,
that's incredible.
And I'm trying to think what else I had on this one. I think that might be all. I guess the bigger stuff. The only other last piece is John Wood, the guy that plays Professor Falcon. He's actually the voice of Joshua. And there's an interesting story there. It was in the one of the audio tracks that talks about how they made him record everything backwards. Like he said everything, all the words he said backwards, and then they replayed them, and that's what kind of gave it the broken English that Joshua has in the movie. So he actually does play two roles in this movie. The soundtrack itself, we've already talked about all the pop stuff, but there's actually a 35th edition soundtrack with all of the music, all the orchestrated music, which I think is a really great soundtrack. It is impossible to find. There were only, in 2018, there were 2,500 copies that were made. It sells for about $100, $150 on eBay if you want a copy today. Mm-hmm. Very difficult.
It's on YouTube.
What's that?
It's on YouTube.
It's on YouTube. Yeah. Yeah. So there's a way you can get the soundtrack for all this. And I guess my final thoughts on it is, I mean, this was a movie that really kind of changed a lot of things for me. I really wanted to get into computers, wanted to do more. It would be several years later before I actually got my hands on my own personal computer. But I do credit this for, sparking my interest in IT and wanting to go down that field, and I'm still in there today. So, but I never did anything like this. Never did any kind of hacking outside of just stupid, password barraging on BBSs. I can say that. So, Will, did you ever do any hacking?
No, sir.
Okay. Uh-huh. All right. Well, we'll end there. Well, before we go, I got one thing to talk about for the scoreboard. So our buddy JR, who's with us tonight, gave us a 5-star review on iTunes. He says, there couldn't be a better Ready Player One podcast if it was done by Ernest Cline himself. Albert, Will, and guests go beyond the book with deep dives into all the references with tons of humor and passionate insight. I have just as much fun listening and watching these episodes as I did reading the book. So thank you, sir. That's
awesome.
Very humbling. Appreciate you doing that and putting that review in for us.
Albert, we didn't play the game show with you, and we didn't go through it.
When were you going to do it?
Well, I was waiting for a point to put it in, but we'll put it right here at the end of the show.
Okay, let's
right, here we go.
Yeah, go
All
ahead.
right, here we go. Since chapter 11 is largely about playing flick syncs, I thought, well, let's see how well these two Gunters would do if they were put in a couple of the movies that we've talked about today. So we're just going to go with, we'll say best out of 3. All of these lines will be coming from War Games. I'm going to set it up with 1 or maybe 2 lines. You follow it up with the next line in the script.
Okay.
Here we go. Again, we are going to award bonus points for you acting this out and using the proper vocal inflection. So we are going to start with Albert. Here we go, Albert. Ready?
Ready.
All right, Lightman. Maybe you could tell us who first suggested the idea of reproduction without sex.
Your wife?
Ooh, yeah, I'm going to give that to you. It's your wife, but I'll give you the
I tried to do the eyes. Do the eyes, but
that was good.
I didn't do the I forgot about that.
It's probably not coming through on the podcast, but
That's
he did do
right,
the eyes.
Yeah.
All right. Here we go. This one's for you, Jason. Ready?
Yeah.
What's the primary goal? You should know that, Professor. You program me. Oh, come on. What's the primary goal?
I got nothing.
Albert for the win.
I don't. The primary goal to win the game.
Yes.
I don't remember how he says it though, but
he says it like that.
Okay,
to win the game, and then they're like showing it in bold.
Yeah.
So we didn't even get to too many of those because Albert sweeps it. Thanks for staying for the extra 45 seconds. Way to hang in there, Jason.
Well, what can I say?
They're actually going to get harder, so I don't think there's
there's no way.
I don't think we would have gone any further, honestly. All right.
Well, Jason, thanks for coming. That was a blast.
Yeah, no, I had a lot of fun. Thanks for having me on.
Good. Jason, where can they find you? Tell us about one more time where they can find you on social media or anywhere else.
So on social media, you can find us at Satis_podcast on Twitter and Instagram. You can go to smokinganddrinkinginspace.com or you can go to creativebraincandy.com. We're in both places there. You can sign up with your RSS feed for the podcast and listen to all the back episodes if you want.
Yes, and they are very, very entertaining, all of them. So I highly recommend it. You guys do a great job on that show, and I'm looking forward to the Ready Player One and the War Games and all the other ones that we've talked about tonight. Those are going to be great too.
Yeah,
and Insurrection, to believe it or not, I can't wait to hear.
Yeah, you can't wait to hear us dunk on Insurrection.
Is Crowley going to be on that episode?
Yeah.
Oh.
We're actually postponing, so we're going to be taking a week off so that he can recover from some storms that happened to him this past week. But we'll be back with Crowley Insurrection. He's not getting out of that movie. No.
I can't wait. It's just going to be hilarious.
He doesn't get to watch all the good ones and then skip the bad.
Yeah, skip the bad ones. If he had his choice, he would, but no.
Oh, I know.
Will, any final thoughts on War Games or Chapter 11 before we head out of here?
For those that were actually watching the podcast, Albert's background is the NORAD Command Center, the Operations Center from the film. My background is what it actually looked like at the time. Interestingly, following this movie, 3 years later, the Air Force asked for funding. And after that, by 1987, NORAD's command center looks suspiciously like what's in Albert's background.
That's awesome. Oh, that's the best part. No, probably not the best thing we've said tonight, but that's a good point of trivia. So, all right. Well, thanks for that. And thank you again for everybody that joined us live. And we'll get this show out here, I don't know, sometime next week. So tune in next week. We'll be back on Thursday to talk chapter 12. And that'll be same time at 9 p.m. Central. So until then, we will see you guys next week.
The views and opinions of the Basement hosts are of our own and are not in any way affiliated with Random House or Ernest Klein. All quotes, music, sounds, trademarked, and copyrighted material referenced in the show are owned by the respectful companies and creators and are used by the Basement as fair use for entertainment purposes only. It would take me a month to read this whole disclaimer, but sad to say, I don't have that kind of time.